Thoughts often parade as the highest form of human insight, cold, clean, and objective. But Nietzsche dares us to see them differently. He suggests that our most rational thoughts are not the noble offspring of pure logic, but mere shadows cast by deeper, hidden emotions. You don't think your way into belief. You feel your way there first, and thinking follows like a servant dressed in the illusion of authority. What you call a thought might just be the linguistic ghost of something your heart decided long before your head caught up. Thoughts are shadows of our feelings. We tend to idolize the intellect, yet behind every reasonable opinion lies a burning emotion, an insecurity, a desire for control, a longing for meaning, or a fear of insignificance. When someone defends their ideas with fierce certainty, it's often not logic at work, it's their feelings in disguise. This is why debates rarely change minds. You're not arguing with thoughts, you're confronting someone's emotional roots. Nietzsche forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth. What we believe most fiercely might actually be what we feel most desperately. A man may believe in justice because he feels rage at betrayal. A woman might reject religion because she still grieves a God who didn't save her loved one. Beneath every philosophical system is a human ache trying to name itself. If thoughts are only shadows, what then is casting the light? Emotions. And if you want to understand someone's ideas, don't start with what they think. Start with what they feel. That's where the truth really begins. Philosophy is a personal confession. Every grand philosophy, every sweeping system of thought that claims to reveal truth is, in Nietzsche's eyes, something far more intimate and vulnerable. A personal confession. Strip away the logic, the arguments, the abstractions, and what remains is the philosopher himself, naked, trembling, and exposed. Behind every moral claim is a wound. Behind every metaphysical framework is a longing. Philosophy doesn't begin with reason. It begins with pain. When a philosopher tells you what reality is, he's really telling you what hurts. When he describes how the world should be, he is confessing what the world has denied him. No one creates a philosophy detached from themselves. They are not mapping the world. They are mapping their own soul. Schopenhauer's obsession with suffering wasn't about humanity. It was about his suffering. Plato's idealism wasn't truth. It was his desperate escape from the imperfection of the world he couldn't bear. This idea is disturbing because it implies that objectivity is a lie. It suggests that even the most pure reasoning is soaked in biography. We don't think our way to neutrality. We bleed ourselves into beliefs. A pacifist may not be noble. He may be terrified. A moralist may not be virtuous. He may be full of shame. When Nietzsche reads philosophers, he's not interested in their syllogisms. He's listening for their trauma. To understand a philosopher, you don't ask what he argues. You ask what he needs. Because every philosophy is a mirror of the person who made it, and every mirror hides a confession. Style reflects philosophy. Nietzsche didn't just write philosophy, he performed it, and through this he revealed something others try to hide. Style is not decoration, style is essence. The way a philosopher writes is not a surface choice, it is their philosophy made flesh. You can't separate the message from the music. If the writing is sterile, the soul behind it likely fears chaos. If the writing dances, it's because the spirit behind it embraces uncertainty. A man who thinks in thunder writes in thunder. A thinker who distrusts simplicity will not write simply. Nietzsche's aphorisms are sharp and sudden because his worldview is raw and volatile. He refuses to lull the reader with systematized safety. His style bleeds, it rages, it seduces, and that tells you everything. You know a thinker's courage not by his claims, but by the texture of his language. A philosophy that trembles with poetry is one that has stared into the abyss and still dares to sing. We are trained to revere clean logic, to trust dry arguments, but often the driest thinkers are the most afraid. afraid of contradiction, afraid of being seen, afraid of losing control. They hide behind footnotes, behind hedges and clauses and passive voice, but their style betrays them. It reveals a mind that distrusts life, a soul that seeks refuge in structure. Nietzsche invites us to look at the writing before the content. Is the voice alive? Is it brave? Is it hiding? Because how you say something, your rhythm, your tone, your form, is already declaring what you believe about truth, chaos, and yourself. Truth is a mobile army of metaphors. We think of truth as something eternal, fixed, cold, shining with divine objectivity. But Nietzsche rips the veil away. He tells us that what we call truth is nothing more than a shifting battlefield of metaphors, illusions that have been repeated so often we've forgotten their illusions. Every concept, every word, every fact is just a metaphor hardened into habit, and the longer we use them, the more we mistake them for reality. Language doesn't reveal the world, it filters it. We cut up the chaos of life with words, hoping to make it manageable. We say leaf, and suddenly we forget the unique shape, color, death, and history of that one trembling thing on a branch. We've erased the real in favor of a symbol. Multiply that by every word you speak and you begin to see. We live not in the world, but in a cage of familiar signs. Nietzsche's revelation is unsettling. It means that truth isn't discovered. It's invented, negotiated, and enforced. A mobile army, because ideas shift with power, with time, with mood. The truths of yesterday become the lies of tomorrow. Even our logic is built on buried metaphors. Cause, identity, self. None of them are pure. They are old dreams dressed in academic robes. And yet, we cling to these metaphors like lifelines. We need them to function, to speak, to stay sane. But Nietzsche whispers a warning: never mistake the map for the terrain. What you worship as truth may be nothing more than a dead metaphor still marching in uniform. Greatness requires cruelty to oneself. Nietzsche does not flatter the path to greatness. He doesn't speak of balance, comfort, or self-love. Instead, he exposes a brutal secret. To become truly great, you must be willing to hurt yourself, not in body, but in ego, in certainty, in safety. True transformation demands an almost savage honesty with yourself. It means dragging your most fragile illusions into the light and watching them burn, even when they once gave you warmth. This kind of cruelty is not sadism. It's sacred. It is the willingness to destroy what is soft and mediocre within you. It's the moment you silence the voice that begs for rest and instead choose the fire. The great do not pamper their insecurities. They dissect them. They betray their comforts. They sever from the familiar and march into the unknown, bleeding, stripped, and alone. Nietzsche admired those who shattered themselves to rebuild stronger, the warrior who betrays his weakness, the thinker who dismantles his identity, the artist who rips their own soul open for the world to see. This isn't self-care, it's self-conquest. You don't ascend by being kind to your cowardice. You ascend by crushing it. Greatness means becoming your own sculptor, and the raw marble is your fear, your doubt, your laziness. The chisel must cut deep. You must be ruthless. You must be willing to kill who you were in order to give birth to who you might be. That's why so few become great, because greatness doesn't feel good. It feels like war with yourself. Forgetting is essential to life. We idolize memory. We treat it as a virtue, a sign of intelligence, even morality. But Nietzsche flips this on its head. He tells us that forgetting, deliberate, instinctive, healthy forgetting, is not a flaw, but a force. Without it, life would be unbearable. If we remembered everything, every wound, every humiliation, every regret, we would drown in a sea of unfinished pain. To forget is to heal, to adapt, to move. Memory chains us to the past. Forgetting lets us live. It is forgetting that allows us to wake up and begin again, to fall in love after heartbreak, to try after failure, to forgive when everything in us wants to stay angry. Memory is heavy. It clings, it accuses, but forgetting is light. It frees us from yesterday's gravity. Nietzsche doesn't mean lazy amnesia. He means the active silence of the soul, the ability to let go of what no longer serves life. Even justice demands forgetting. Revenge lives in memory. Resentment feeds on remembrance. But vitality? Vitality requires the art of release. You must unremember the times you were small, the faces that mocked you, the chances you missed, not to lie to yourself, but to stop being ruled by ghosts. In a world obsessed with documenting everything, with archiving and recalling and preserving, Nietzsche reminds us, peace often comes not from knowing more, but from erasing. Forgetting is the secret rhythm beneath joy, the silent strength that lets us start anew. Without it, we become monuments to our own suffering. With it, we remain human, wounded, yes, but always becoming. There is no objective morality. We grow up believing in a clear line between right and wrong, as if these concepts are carved into the fabric of the universe. But Nietzsche takes a sledgehammer to that illusion. There is no divine list, no cosmic judge, no universal moral compass humming quietly in the background of reality. Morality, he tells us, is not discovered. It is created. It is not eternal. It is imposed. And it is always born out of power, fear, and desire. Every moral code is the echo of someone's need. The weak invented humility to protect themselves from the strong. The powerful glorified honor to justify domination. Society sanctified suffering to make sense of their pain. What we call good is nothing more than what helped a particular group survive, and what we call evil is often just a threat to that survival. Strip away the preaching, and morality is war by other means. This realization is dangerous because it strips the ground out from under your feet. If there is no objective morality, then the things you were taught to feel guilty for might not be wrong. The things you admired might be illusions. Your entire moral identity could be a script written by people who wanted to control you. That doesn't mean nothing matters. It means you have to decide what matters, knowing full well that no God or law guarantees your choice. To live without objective morality is to live without a safety net. But Nietzsche believed that's where real freedom begins, not with answers, but with the courage to stand in the void and create values of your own. Eternal recurrence tests your soul. Imagine this: every moment you live, every breath, every mistake, every kiss, every betrayal, every sleepless night and fleeting joy, you will live it again, not once, not twice, but forever. Eternal recurrence is not a doctrine, it is a test, a mirror held up to your life with a terrible question. Would you do it all again, exactly the same, an infinite number of times? Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort, he offers confrontation. Eternal recurrence isn't about metaphysics, it's about meaning. If the thought of reliving your life eternally fills you with dread, then something inside you is deeply out of tune with your own existence. But if you can say yes, if you can welcome the eternal return with open arms, then you have achieved something rare, the art of living without regret. This is not about perfection, it's about affirmation. Can you love your fate enough to embrace even its darkest corners? Can you bless the pain that shaped you, the chaos that built you, the choices that broke you open? Eternal recurrence forces you to live deliberately, as if every small act echoes through eternity. Because what if it does? Most people live like they're waiting for something better, something easier. But eternal recurrence asks you to stop waiting. It demands you treat every second as sacred because it will return to you again and again. So ask yourself, not with fear, but with fire, if the life you are living now came back to you forever, would you rejoice or would you scream? Your answer is your truth. Nobility comes from inner strength. Nietzsche's idea of nobility has nothing to do with bloodlines, birthrights, or crowns. It cannot be inherited bought or given. Real nobility, he tells us, is forged within. It is the quiet fire of someone who stands tall in their own truth, even when the world offers no applause. It is not about status, it is about stance. A noble spirit does not crave approval, nor does it bend to pity, fear, or resentment. It radiates dignity because it refuses to be ruled by anything weaker than itself. This inner nobility doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't boast. It simply is. It lives in the person who walks away from the crowd without looking back, in the one who speaks gently because they are unshaken, in the one who chooses solitude over conformity, pain over lies, and growth over comfort. They are not noble because they are better than others. They are noble because they have mastered themselves. This nobility rejects victimhood. It doesn't seek revenge. It doesn't collapse under suffering. Instead, it transforms wounds into wisdom, failures into fuel. It does not cry for fairness. It creates meaning where none is given. It carries the weight of existence with grace, and even in silence, it commands respect. And that is why true nobility is rare, because it demands the hardest kind of strength, the kind no one sees, no one rewards, and no one can fake. It is not about being celebrated. It is about becoming someone even you can admire when no one's watching. Knowledge risks madness. We chase knowledge like salvation, as if to know more is to be more. But Nietzsche warns us, the deeper you peer into truth, the more it begins to crack the frame of your mind. Real knowledge isn't a warm light. It's a cold fire. It burns away illusions, yes, but it also burns away comfort, identity, certainty. The more you truly know, the lonelier you become, because knowledge doesn't just show you the world, it shows you the abyss behind it. There's a reason most people only ever scratch the surface. There's a reason so much education is distraction in disguise. To really know something, yourself, history, human nature, existence, it shatters the pretty stories that hold your sanity together. What if your morals are inherited lies? What if your memories are just survival edits? What if everything you cling to is just the mask of chaos? Nietzsche didn't idolize knowledge. He respected it like one respects a wild animal, beautiful but capable of tearing you apart. The madman, the prophet, the artist on the edge, they touch something most people are too frightened to face, not because they're broken, but because they've seen too much, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the danger. The ones who go too deep don't always come back. To know is to risk unraveling. To truly awaken is to risk going insane, but some do it anyway, because for them, ignorance is a worse death. The question is, how much truth can you survive? Science rests on metaphysical faith. We're taught to trust science because it's rational, because it's grounded in evidence, because it deals in facts, not beliefs. But Nietzsche tears through that comfort with a single devastating insight. Even science, for all its precision and progress, rests on a faith, a metaphysical assumption that cannot be proven by science itself. It believes blindly and absolutely in the idea that truth is better than illusion, that logic can capture reality, and that the world operates in a stable, knowable order. But where did that belief come from? Can you prove that logic corresponds to the fabric of existence? Can you demonstrate, outside of circular reasoning, that reason itself is the ultimate tool for understanding? You can't. These are not conclusions. They are presuppositions, deep, unprovable convictions carried like sacred relics. They are philosophical choices, not empirical facts. Science denies superstition, but it bows to its own invisible gods, objectivity, coherence, causality. It scoffs at religion for faith without evidence, yet it too stands on ground it cannot examine. Why should nature obey laws? Why should measurement unveil essence? Why should reason not deceive? These questions unsettle because they threaten the altar of modern certainty. Nietzsche doesn't reject science. He reveals its shadow. He shows us that underneath the microscope lies a human need, the need to believe that the universe is understandable, that chaos can be conquered by intellect. But that, too, is a leap of faith. Even in our pursuit of truth, we are still believers. Only now we kneel before formulas instead of gods. Will to power surpasses will to survive. Survival is not the deepest drive. Nietzsche exposes this lie with a piercing insight. We are not creatures who merely seek to endure. We are creatures who ache to overcome. Beneath the instinct to live is a far more primal force, the will to power. It is not about domination over others. It is the inner urge to expand, to become, to transcend what you were yesterday, even if it kills you. People die for honor, for love, for beauty, for an idea. They destroy themselves to create art. They sacrifice safety for meaning. No animal dies for glory. Only humans do. That is the will to power at work. It's the drive that says, I will not just breathe. I will shape my existence. I will not simply survive. I will become something worthy of existence. This force isn't gentle. It doesn't beg. It demands. It makes you restless with mediocrity. It whispers that comfort is a coffin, that to truly live is to risk annihilation for the chance at transformation. It's why the warrior charges into battle, why the poet starves for beauty, why the philosopher stands alone against the world. Survival begs you to avoid pain. Will to power invites you to use it. It tells you that strength comes from struggle, that victory is forged in failure, and that true life begins only when you stop trying to be safe. The will to power is not a luxury. It's your birthright. And if you bury it, you don't just lose greatness, you lose yourself. No moral facts exist. We speak of morality as if it were carved into the bones of the universe, unchanging, universal, undeniable. But Nietzsche rips that illusion apart with a cold, clear blade. There are no moral facts. There is no divine ledger tallying good and evil, no eternal law humming beneath our actions. What we call morality is just a human invention, crafted from instincts, fears, and cultural agreements that shift like sand beneath our feet. Think about it. Killing is evil unless it's war. Lying is wrong unless it's politics. Obedience is virtuous unless it leads to atrocity. Morality bends, twists, reverses itself depending on time, place, power, and perspective. If it were truly objective, it wouldn't change, but it always does. What one age sanctifies, the next condemns. What one tribe worships, another despises. Nietzsche exposes this terrifying truth not to make us cruel, but to make us awake. Because the moment you realize there are no moral facts, you are no longer bound by inherited chains. You are no longer a puppet of someone else's righteousness. But with that freedom comes weight. You can't lean on dogma anymore. You must choose. You must create. You must stand for something not because it's written in stone, but because you, in all your trembling humanity, decide it matters. That is what Nietzsche demands. The courage to live without a net, to stare into the void where moral facts were supposed to be, and build your own values, knowing no one is coming to tell you they're right. Love is a form of power. We speak of love as if it is pure, selfless, gentle, but Nietzsche rips the veil from that illusion and exposes something darker, more honest. Love is not the opposite of power. It is power. It's the desire to possess, to merge, to transform. Love pulls people into each other's orbit, not with tenderness alone, but with force, intensity, and will. It is not weakness. It is a storm masked as sweetness. When we love, we want to matter. We want to shape the other. We want them to see us, need us, reflect us, belong to us. Even the most selfless declarations carry the hidden cry, do not leave, do not forget me, let me matter. Love makes demands. It consumes time, attention, identity. It rearranges lives. And this power is not evil, it's simply real. To pretend otherwise is to sentimentalize what is truly volcanic. Think of a mother's fierce protection, a lover's jealousy, a friend's silent expectations. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of love's gravitational pull. Love gives us the strength to endure agony, to face humiliation, to forgive the unforgivable, not because we are kind, but because the will behind it is immense. Nietzsche doesn't degrade love by calling it power. He elevates it. He sees it as one of the most potent forces through which the will to power expresses itself, not to crush, but to connect and change. We love not to vanish into the other, but to expand our reach into the soul of someone else. To love is to risk, to love is to want, and to love is to wield a kind of sacred power. Morality is herd instinct. We like to think our morality is noble, conscious, freely chosen. But Nietzsche shatters that illusion with a brutal clarity. Most morality is not the product of reason or reflection. It is herd instinct. It is the unconscious pull to conform, to obey, to belong. What we call good is often just what keeps the group stable. What we call evil is often what threatens the fragile order of the pack. Morality began not as truth, but as survival. Early tribes couldn't afford chaos. Those who questioned, disobeyed, or stood too tall were threats. So the tribe learned to shame them, isolate them, call them immoral, not because they were wrong, but because they were different. And over time, that instinct to follow, to submit, to avoid standing out was baked into our psychology. The obedient survived. The defiant were burned, stoned, crucified, silenced. Even now, in our polished modern world, herd morality lives on. When someone says, "You can't say that," or "That's just wrong," ask yourself, are they defending truth or just protecting the comfort of the crowd? Most people don't want to be good. They want to be approved of. They want to fit. They want applause. And morality becomes their mask. Nietzsche dares you to rip that mask off, to realize that being moral in the herd's eyes often means being small, tame, safe. But greatness never comes from obedience. It comes from the one who breaks away, who questions the rules, who risks being cast out for living a truth the herd isn't ready to hear. Sickness can provoke growth. Nietzsche knew the taste of illness intimately. His body broken, his nerves shattered, his mind burning with fever, and yet he refused to see sickness as mere tragedy. Instead, he saw it as a crucible, a violent purification through which something deeper, sharper, and more honest could emerge. Sickness, he believed, is not just an interruption of life. It is an interrogation of it. When the body breaks, so does the illusion, and in that collapse, the soul is finally forced to speak. Pain slows you. It strips you of the distractions that once kept your questions buried. It brings you face to face with your limits. It makes you ask, what am I without my strength? What am I when I can no longer perform? Who am I when I'm alone with the ache? Sickness exposes what comfort conceals, and in that raw exposure, the possibility of growth appears, not in spite of suffering, but through it. Nietzsche believed that those who suffer deeply gain a clarity the healthy never touch. They see life's masks fall. They watch their vanity, their pettiness, their borrowed beliefs melt in the fire of endurance. What survives is something leaner, something real, something that can no longer be fooled. This doesn't make sickness noble. It makes it useful. It's not romantic, it's brutal, but in its brutality lies transformation, because the self that emerges from illness is often not the same one that entered it. It is scarred, yes, but scarred like armor, not like ruin. Pity corrupts strength. Pity wears a noble face. It looks like kindness, like softness, like humanity at its best. But Nietzsche sees through the disguise. To him, pity is not a virtue. It is a silent poison. It drains the strong, flatters the weak, and turns suffering into power. At its core, pity is not about lifting others up. It's about pulling the strong down to their level. It does not heal, it infects. When you pity someone, you do not see them as equal. You see them as broken, beneath, incapable. You strip them of dignity by replacing their struggle with your sentimentality. And worse, you become addicted to feeling good about feeling bad for others. Pity becomes a performance, a way to feel superior while pretending to be humble. Nietzsche believed pity spreads weakness. It rewards dependency. It sanctifies suffering and turns pain into a currency. And once that happens, people begin to cling to their wounds. They start using their pain to control, to silence, to guilt others into submission. Pity becomes power, but it's a power rooted in decay. The strong, if they are not careful, are seduced by this. They begin to feel guilt for their strength. They lower themselves to avoid hurting feelings. They make themselves small in a world that praises the fragile. But strength should not apologize. It should inspire. It should challenge. It should awaken others, not coddle them. To Nietzsche, compassion that empowers is noble, but pity that infantilizes is rot. And if you embrace it too long, you forget how to rise, because you've spent too long kneeling beside those who refuse to stand. Life-denying values destroy vitality. Not all values are virtuous. Not all morals are noble. Nietzsche saw with piercing clarity that some values, especially the ones society praises most, do not affirm life, but suffocate it. They whisper that your instincts are dangerous, your desires are shameful, your joy is sin. These are life-denying values, beliefs that demand you shrink, apologize, abstain, and kneel. They do not teach strength, they teach surrender. They do not ignite passion, they poison it. These values disguise themselves as virtue. Humility becomes cowardice. Chastity becomes fear. Obedience becomes spiritual paralysis. We call it goodness, but what it really demands is self-erasure. It teaches you to feel guilty for being powerful, to despise your body, to distrust your ambition. You're told that to want too much is wrong, to feel too deeply is dangerous, and to burn too brightly is pride. But Nietzsche didn't want to tame humanity. He wanted a world where people lived with intensity, with risk, with fullness. A world where instincts were not demonized, but celebrated as sources of creativity, beauty, and strength. Life-affirming values awaken the soul. Life-denying ones put it to sleep. When you follow values that deny life, you wither, slowly, quietly. You call it peace, but it's just resignation. You call it virtue, but it's just fear made holy. And eventually, you forget how to hunger, how to laugh without guilt, how to feel alive without apology. Nietzsche's challenge is this: dare to question the values you've inherited. Ask if they feed your fire or extinguish it, because a value that costs your vitality is not moral, it's a cage. Art transcends philosophy. Philosophy asks questions. Art feels them. Where philosophers dissect life with scalpels of reason, artists devour it whole and spit it back in colors, sounds, and blood. Nietzsche believed that no argument, no logic, no dialectic could ever reach as deep as a single wordless scream on a canvas or a trembling note in a melody. Art doesn't explain existence, it expresses it. And in doing so, it tells truths that philosophy can only circle around. Philosophy builds systems, neat, orderly, noble lies designed to tame the chaos. But art refuses to tame. It opens the floodgates. It lets the horror in, the ecstasy, the longing, the rage. It makes no claim to objectivity because it knows the deepest truths are not spoken, they are suffered. Art doesn't prove anything. It moves you, and in that movement, something ancient stirs, something philosophy forgot how to touch. Nietzsche did not trust cold thinking. He saw it as a defense mechanism, a fortress against feeling. But art? Art is the wound itself. It's the madness we're taught to suppress, suddenly made holy. One brushstroke, one verse, one scream from a violin, can dissolve an entire worldview in a heartbeat, because while philosophy analyzes death, art grieves it. While philosophy defines love, art aches with it. This is why Nietzsche wrote like a poet and bled like an artist, because when reason fails, and it always does, it is art that remains, whispering the only truths worth living for, not answers, but echoes of something realer than reason ever dared to be. All knowledge is interpretation. We cling to knowledge like it's a lighthouse in the storm, fixed, clear, undeniable. But Nietzsche rips that comfort away and reveals the unsettling truth. All knowledge is interpretation. There are no pure facts, no untouched truths. Everything we know, everything we claim to understand, is filtered, shaped, and twisted through human perception, through language, through culture, through desire. You do not see the world, you interpret it, and then call your interpretation truth. When two people look at the same event, they don't see the same thing. One sees betrayal, the other necessity. One sees failure, the other rebirth. Their facts are the same, but their meaning is worlds apart. That meaning isn't in the world, it's assigned by the mind, and that assignment is always personal, always biased, always built from wounds, dreams, fears, and history. Nietzsche's claim is not that knowledge is worthless, it's that it's never neutral. Every scientific law, every historical account, every philosophical insight is drenched in perspective. Even your memories are not records, they are stories, rewritten, reinterpreted, reinvented. The mind doesn't just receive reality, it edits it. This is terrifying because it strips away certainty, but it's also liberating. It means you are not bound to see the world as others demand. You are not trapped by inherited meanings. You can interpret anew. You can choose the lens. You can reframe what once crushed you into something that strengthens you. Because if all knowledge is interpretation, then the final interpreter is you. Philosophy should be dangerous. Real philosophy doesn't comfort, it wounds. It doesn't make you feel safe, it rips the ground out from under your feet. Nietzsche believed that philosophy should not be a sterile academic exercise, but a weapon, one sharp enough to cut through illusions, identities, and everything you've clung to as truth. If you read philosophy and feel at peace, you're not reading philosophy. You're reading a lullaby. Philosophy, when it is real, threatens your sense of self. It drags you into the fire of self-confrontation. It whispers questions that unravel everything. What if your morality is a lie? What if your suffering is your fault? What if the meaning you live by is nothing but fear dressed up as virtue? These questions do not guide. They burn. They are not meant to reassure. They are meant to awaken. The world has neutered philosophy, turning it into debates, textbooks, and seminars. Nietzsche detested this. For him, thinking was blood sport. He didn't write to be understood. He wrote to disturb, to set fire to your borrowed beliefs, to tear off the mask you didn't know you were wearing. Every real philosopher, in Nietzsche's view, is dangerous, not because he knows more, but because he dares to feel deeper, see clearer, and refuse what everyone else accepts. We do not need more gentle thinkers. We need bombs disguised as books, thoughts that hurt before they heal, ideas that seduce you into dismantling yourself. Because if your philosophy doesn't threaten the life you've built, it's not philosophy, it's decoration. And Nietzsche never believed in pretty lies. Christianity is slave morality. To Nietzsche, Christianity was not a triumph of love or divine grace. It was a revolt, not of the strong, but of the weak, a quiet, cunning uprising of those who could not wield power in the open, so they rewrote the very meaning of virtue itself. He called it slave morality, a system of values born not from strength, but from resentment. It wasn't created to uplift, it was created to invert, to turn the noble into the wicked and the powerless into the righteous. Before Christianity, ancient cultures celebrated strength, courage, pride, and honor. Power was admired, life was affirmed. But the weak, the sick, the humiliated, they could not compete on those terms. So they created a new morality, one that said, power is evil, humility is holy, wealth is corruption, poverty is purity, revenge is sin, forgiveness is divine. In doing so, they found a way to feel superior without ever becoming strong. This morality is soaked in hidden vengeance. It doesn't say, I am good. It says, you are bad. It condemns passion, pleasure, and instinct because it cannot control them. It rewards obedience and guilt because those are easy to manipulate. It doesn't lift humanity toward greatness. It shames greatness and calls it pride. Nietzsche saw Christianity not as spiritual truth, but as psychological warfare, a moral code for the bitter disguised as love. It teaches you to bow, to shrink, to wait for salvation instead of creating your own destiny. And in doing so, it turns the human spirit against itself until the only thing we're proud of is our weakness. The last man is a horror. He is healthy, safe, agreeable. He avoids pain, avoids risk, avoids depth. He no longer loves fiercely or hates dangerously. He seeks only comfort, lukewarm pleasures, mild entertainment, shallow goals. He says, we have invented happiness, and then he blinks. This is Nietzsche's last man, the end result of a world that has killed its gods, silenced its passions, and traded greatness for peace. He is not evil. He is worse. He is numb. The last man is what happens when humanity stops striving, when danger becomes taboo, when suffering is seen as failure. He fears conflict, avoids intensity, and laughs at those who dream too big or fall too hard. He is tolerant, not because he understands, but because he no longer feels enough to care. He no longer seeks truth, only what is useful, no longer love, only convenience, no longer meaning, only distraction. Nietzsche saw him coming, saw the rise of mediocrity disguised as morality, saw a future where no one offends because no one dares to speak fire, a future of sterile safety, where ambition is replaced by contentment, where rebellion is obsolete because no one remembers why it mattered. And the horror is not that the last man rules us. The horror is that we envy him because his life is easy, because he never breaks, because he never bleeds, but he also never soars, never shatters, never becomes. He is the end of man, the moment evolution halts and we choose comfort over becoming. The last man survives everything except the call to rise above himself. Becoming is greater than being. We are taught to seek identity, to find who we are, to define it, to hold it steady like a monument. But Nietzsche urges us to break that illusion. Being is not the goal. Becoming is, not arriving but evolving, not grasping for a final answer, but remaining in motion. Life, at its core, is flux, and the moment you fix yourself into a rigid idea of who you are, you begin to rot. You begin to die. Being is static. It's safe. It offers the comfort of labels: student, parent, artist, survivor, victim, leader. But those labels become cages. They whisper, stay here. This is who you are now. Don't change. Don't outgrow. And so we shrink ourselves to fit into our own definitions. We protect identities like they're sacred, even when they no longer serve us. Nietzsche saw freedom in the opposite. He saw glory in transformation, in burning away old versions of the self, even when it hurts, even when it terrifies. Becoming means choosing movement over certainty. It means letting go of who you were yesterday to make room for who you could be tomorrow. It means being chaos with a pulse. The world tells you to be someone. Nietzsche dares you to become someone again and again, because who you are is not a truth waiting to be discovered. It is a fire waiting to be lit. And the moment you stop becoming, the moment you choose stability over growth, is the moment you betray your own potential. Don't ask, who am I? Ask, what am I willing to become? Chaos births dancing stars. Nietzsche speaks in Fire and Poetry when he writes, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. It is not a metaphor. It is a law of becoming. Chaos is not a flaw. It is not a sickness to be cured or a mess to be cleaned. It is the raw, swirling, violent potential inside you. The fear, the doubt, the rage, the longing, the contradictions you try to silence, the parts of you that don't fit into polite society. That chaos is sacred because out of it, beauty is born. The dancing star is not a polished product. It is not perfection. It is transcendence, and it only appears after you've stood in your own storm without running. Most people never reach it. They fear their chaos, so they bury it under schedules, substances, identities. But Nietzsche says, go deeper. Don't silence your madness. Lean into it. Let it tear through the lies you inherited. Let it show you what you really are beneath all the roles you've been forced to play. Your pain is not in the way. It is the way. Your chaos is not your weakness. It is your womb. It's the only place something original can be born. And if you kill it, if you sanitize your soul for the sake of calm, you may survive, but you'll never create, never become, because it's only through the storm, never around it, that something divine and dangerous and luminous can rise. That's where stars come from, not order, chaos. The Übermensch is process, not product. The Übermensch, often mistranslated as Superman, is not a final form, not a godlike endpoint, not a polished statue standing above humanity. Nietzsche never meant it as a destination. The Übermensch is becoming in its purest, fiercest form. It is a process, a relentless act of transcending what you were every single day, not better than others, better than yourself. Yesterday, he is not someone you become and then stop. He is not perfection. He is the courage to destroy and rebuild endlessly. He is the fire that refuses to burn out, even when nothing remains but ash. The Übermensch is not the man who has all the answers, but the one who no longer needs them. He writes his own values. He carries his own meaning. He walks without a script. This is not a comfortable life. It's not peaceful. It's war, internal, beautiful war. To move toward the Übermensch means killing the parts of you that cling to safety. It means outgrowing beliefs you once thought sacred. It means turning guilt into fuel and fear into momentum. You do not wait for heaven. You bring it down or burn it up trying. Most will never walk this path, not because they can't, but because they won't. Because it's easier to be told who you are than to become it. Because it's easier to follow than to create. But the Übermensch is not a title waiting to be earned. It's a flame you choose to carry through darkness, through doubt, through everything that screams for you to stop. And when you carry it, even for a moment, you are already becoming. Time is circular. We've been taught to see time as a straight line, past behind us, future ahead, always moving forward. But Nietzsche shatters that illusion with a vision far more terrifying. Time is not a line. Time is a circle. Every moment, every pain, every joy, every heartbreak, you will live it again and again and again, not once, but eternally. This is the eternal return, not as fantasy, but as the ultimate test. Could you live your life over, exactly as it was, forever? There is no escape in this circle, no next chapter to rewrite what came before. Every choice echoes, every hesitation, every betrayal, every kiss. The circle makes your life unbearable or sacred, depending on how you've lived it. If the thought of living your life again fills you with horror, then Nietzsche says you are not truly alive. You are merely enduring, waiting, hoping the future will fix what you refuse to face. But if you can stare at your past, your shame, your losses, your mistakes, and say yes to all of it, to live it over without changing a second, then you've found something holy. You've said yes, not just to life's highs, but its deepest suffering. And in that, yes, you've conquered fate. You've become your own God, not by escaping the circle, but by dancing in it. Time is not moving forward. It is folding in on itself, always returning. And the question Nietzsche throws like a dagger into your soul is this: would you choose it again? Every second, every breath, forever. Conscience is social conditioning. We're taught that conscience is our moral compass, an inner voice whispering right from wrong. But Nietzsche tears that illusion apart. Conscience, he says, is not divine guidance. It's not some sacred force. It's social conditioning, burned into your flesh by years of obedience, shame, and fear. That voice in your head telling you don't do that, it's not truth, it's training. From childhood, we're punished for disobedience, rewarded for compliance. We internalize the rules of the tribe long before we understand them. And by the time we're grown, we don't need the whip anymore. We carry it inside. We become our own jailer. We feel guilt not because we've done something wrong, but because we've stepped outside what others told us was acceptable. Nietzsche calls this the internalization of man, the wild, instinctual self turned inward, clawed, caged, mutilated to fit into society. And the more repressed those instincts, the louder conscience becomes. But it's not moral clarity, it's spiritual scar tissue, it's fear dressed as virtue, it's a life lived under surveillance, even when no one is watching. The most dangerous part? You begin to worship that voice. You believe guilt makes you good. You think self-punishment is proof of your humanity. But Nietzsche asks, what if your conscience isn't your soul speaking, but your captors whispering through you? What if your guilt is not purity, but programming? To be free, you must learn to question that voice. Not all guilt is truth, not all obedience is good, and sometimes the most moral thing you can do is disobey. Man is a rope over an abyss. Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort, he offers a terrifying image. Man is a rope, stretched taut between beast and overman, suspended over an abyss. We are not a finished product. We are not a fixed creature. We are a fragile crossing, a trembling passage between what we were and what we might become. And beneath us, always, is the abyss, chaos, meaninglessness, madness. To be human is to be unfinished, not a destination, but a bridge, not stability, but struggle. We are constantly pulled backward by instinct, fear, comfort, the beast within, and we are called forward by vision, risk, greatness, the overman, the one who creates new values and dares to become more than human. But the crossing is dangerous. It requires balance, discipline, suffering. Most fall. Many never even step onto the rope. The abyss is always there. It whispers nihilism. It tempts you to let go, to collapse, to return to the animal where it's safe. But to walk the rope is to say, I will not go back. It's to choose the terror of growth over the certainty of stagnation. It's to live in tension, in risk, in becoming. Nietzsche's vision is merciless. There is no rescue, no final truth to catch you, no God to steady your step, just wind, just fear, just freedom. But on that rope, if you do not fall, if you dare to keep moving forward, something impossible happens. You begin to change, you begin to rise, you stop being man and begin to become something more. Resentment builds morality. Morality, we like to think, comes from compassion, from reason, from some higher impulse toward justice. But Nietzsche rips that comfort to shreds. He tells us morality, especially the kind that dominates modern life, is not born from love or wisdom. It is born from resentment, from the bitterness of the powerless, from the fury of those who cannot act, and so they moralize. When the weak cannot strike back, they declare striking evil. When they cannot rise, they claim humility is virtue, and thus resentment births morality, not out of goodness, but out of revenge, disguised as righteousness. This process Nietzsche calls ressentiment. It is not just anger, it is a cold, corrosive energy that festers over time. It watches the strong thrive, the bold succeed, and instead of admiring them, it poisons their image. The noble becomes arrogant, the wealthy becomes greedy, the powerful becomes evil, not because they are, but because the weak cannot bear to see themselves left behind. And so morality is reshaped, not to elevate life, but to punish it. Pleasure becomes sin, pride becomes shame, strength becomes cruelty, and suddenly those who suffer are seen as holy. Victims are crowned saints. Weakness is no longer something to overcome. It becomes a weapon. This morality does not lift people. It shackles them. It doesn't inspire greatness. It makes greatness suspicious. Nietzsche's warning is clear. Beware of those who moralize most fiercely. Often, they are not protecting goodness. They are hiding their rage. Their values are not aspirations. They are scars. And every virtue they preach may be a chain they forge out of envy. God is dead. Nietzsche didn't mean it as a metaphor. He meant it as a death notice. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. This isn't triumph. It's tragedy. It's not atheism. It's apocalypse. When Nietzsche said God is dead, he meant that the foundation of Western morality, meaning and truth anchored in a divine being, had collapsed. We killed him not with swords, but with reason, with science, with modernity. And now everything built upon that foundation is crumbling. God's death leaves a void, and that void is not peaceful. It is not liberation. It is terror. Without God, there is no objective morality, no divine purpose, no eternal truth to cling to when everything breaks. And Nietzsche asked the question no one else dares. What now? If the sky is empty, how will we live? What will guide us? Who will we become? He doesn't celebrate the death of God. He watches the body rot while the crowd still prays, unaware he's gone. Churches still stand, morals still echo, but the heartbeat is gone. We are living in the corpse of belief, and soon we must choose. Either invent new gods or face the abyss with open eyes. This is not just about religion, it's about meaning itself. The death of God is the death of certainty, and Nietzsche doesn't offer comfort. He offers fire. He calls us to create where once we obeyed, to become gods ourselves, or be crushed by the weight of a world with no divine center. God is dead. And now the question that haunts every soul: what do you believe in when belief itself has died? Life must be lived as art. To Nietzsche, life is not a problem to be solved, a duty to be fulfilled, or a race to be won. Life is a canvas, a sculpture, a wild, roaring performance. It is meant to be created, not merely endured. You are not here to obey. You are not here to fit in. You are here to express. Every choice, every scar, every failure and triumph. These are brushstrokes, and your task is not to follow a script, but to craft a masterpiece out of your chaos. Living as art means rejecting the gray safety of convention. It means refusing to be a product of your environment and instead becoming a creator of meaning. It is not about beauty. It is about intensity, about dancing even when no one watches, about turning your wounds into gold, about shaping your pain into poetry and your doubts into rhythm. The artist of life does not hide from contradiction. They turn it into motion, color, fire. Most people live like copies, repeats, templates passed down from family, culture, fear. But Nietzsche urges you to become an original, to take your suffering and make it sing, to let your passions break the mold, to treat your life not as something that happens to you, but as something you craft with brutal honesty and sacred defiance. The greatest rebellion is not destruction, it's creation, and the highest form of strength is to look at the chaos of your existence and shape it into something only you could have made. That is what it means to live as art. Illusions are necessary. Nietzsche doesn't scorn illusions. He honors them, not because they are true, but because they are vital. He knew that stripped of our illusions, most people would not become enlightened. They would collapse. Beneath the stories we tell ourselves about meaning, purpose, goodness, progress, there is chaos, emptiness, indifference, and staring directly into that abyss is not noble, it's dangerous. Too much truth, too fast, and the human spirit snaps. We crave illusions not because we are weak, but because we are alive. The myth of love, the fantasy of permanence, the belief that our suffering matters, these are not lies to be mocked. They are structures we build to stay standing. And Nietzsche doesn't ask you to abandon them recklessly. He asks you to recognize them for what they are, creations, not commandments, dreams chosen with open eyes. This is why he admires the artist more than the priest, the poet more than the philosopher. The artist knows the illusion is an illusion and still breathes life into it. The priest believes it blindly. The philosopher tries to kill it, but the artist dances with it, shapes it, transforms it into something that elevates rather than deceives. Nietzsche does not ask you to live without illusion. He asks you to own it. Create your own. Choose the lie that empowers you. Sculpt meaning like a flame you carry through the dark, because the truth is too cruel to worship. But an illusion you build yourself can become divine, not because it's real, but because you dared to give it life. Asceticism is self-hate. At first glance, asceticism appears noble. The monk in silence, the saint in hunger, the seeker renouncing pleasure. It looks like purity, like discipline, like virtue. But Nietzsche rips away the illusion and shows its rotten core. Asceticism is not strength, it is self-hate. It is the spirit turning against the body, the soul poisoning the flesh, the mind declaring war on life itself. It is not a celebration of truth, it is a denial of being. The ascetic despises desire because he fears it. He fears its heat, its wildness, its uncontrollability. So he locks it away and calls the cage sacred. He cannot bear his instincts, so he declares them sinful. He punishes himself not out of enlightenment, but out of shame. And this shame is not divine. It is learned. It is inherited. It is the long echo of a world that told him to want is to be unworthy. But life wants. Life pulses, aches, reaches, burns. To live is to desire, to hunger, to move toward more. Asceticism crushes that movement. It calls stillness holy and suffering a badge of honor. Nietzsche saw this as a sickness, the body infected by resentment, the soul hollowed out by guilt, masquerading as goodness. It is a morality that says no to life. True strength, Nietzsche tells us, does not fear the body. It embraces it. It does not flee temptation. It transforms it. The ascetic flees from chaos. The strong dive in and create from it. So beware those who preach denial as virtue. They may not be pure. They may simply be afraid to feel alive. Guilt is internalized cruelty. Guilt feels noble, like a conscience, like a voice of justice inside us. But Nietzsche tears off its mask and reveals something darker. Guilt is not virtue. It is violence turned inward. It is punishment that no longer needs chains, no longer needs a whip. It lives in your blood, in your breath. You become your own prison, your own tormentor, and the worst part, you think you deserve it. Nietzsche saw guilt not as a sign of moral evolution, but as the legacy of a history soaked in domination and fear. In the beginning, punishment came from others, lashes, exile, pain. But over centuries, that force was driven deeper. Society no longer needed to hurt you. It taught you to hurt yourself. And the more you obeyed, the more guilt was installed into your soul like a parasite whispering, "You are not enough. You must pay. You must kneel." Religion sharpened it. It took your instincts, your strength, your pleasure, your freedom, and called them sins. And when you couldn't destroy those instincts, you turned the knife on yourself. You felt shame for wanting. You felt guilt for being human. And this guilt, Nietzsche says, is not moral. It's sick. It's the self-devouring disease of a culture that fears its own power. True strength isn't the absence of guilt. It's the rebellion against it. It's the refusal to carry inherited shame. It's reclaiming the parts of you that the world taught you to hate, because guilt isn't proof of goodness. It's proof that somewhere along the way, you were taught to punish yourself for being alive. Truth is uglier than lies. We're taught to seek the truth as if it's something noble, clean, enlightening, redemptive. But Nietzsche, ever the arsonist of illusions, warns us, truth is not beautiful. It is brutal. It does not heal. It exposes. It does not uplift. It strips you bare. The truth, when it finally arrives, doesn't cradle you. It claws through you. And that's why we build lies, not out of malice, but necessity. Lies are beautiful because they protect. They soften the glare of the universe. They wrap pain in meaning, disguise chaos as order, and let us sleep through the night believing there's a reason behind our suffering. We lie to ourselves about love, purpose, fairness, the future, not because we're weak, but because the alternative, truth in its raw, unfiltered violence, can break us. The truth is, the world doesn't care. Justice is not guaranteed. Your dreams might mean nothing. Your suffering might not have a lesson. You are not promised redemption. That's the naked truth. And it's ugly enough to drive a person mad if they face it too early, too fast, or too alone. But Nietzsche does not ask us to run from this ugliness. He asks us to endure it, to earn it, to stand in front of it without flinching, without lying, and still choose to live. Not because life is beautiful, but because you are strong enough to love it even when it isn't. The lie comforts, the truth devours, and if you can let it devour you and still say, yes, then you've gone beyond illusions into something terrifying and true. Democracy can enable weakness. Democracy promises equality, fairness, a voice for all. But Nietzsche looks deeper and sees the shadow it hides. He warns that democracy, for all its light, can become a sanctuary for the mediocre, not because it gives power to the people, but because it gives equal power to those who fear greatness. When everyone has a voice, the loudest often becomes the least threatening, and slowly, subtly, democracy can become a tool not of liberation, but of leveling. It begins with good intentions, no one above, no one below, but soon excellence becomes arrogance, strength becomes oppression, genius becomes elitism, the exceptional are shamed, not celebrated. Those who dare to rise are accused of being dangerous, offensive, unfair. The herd begins to govern not by ideals, but by resentment, and the cry for equality shifts into a silent war against difference. Nietzsche doesn't reject democracy because he prefers tyranny. He fears the tyranny of the average, a system where greatness must apologize, where beauty must dim itself, where risk is punished and safety is king. In such a world, power is flattened, not redistributed, but dissolved. This is not a call for cruelty. It's a warning. When we worship equality above all else, we may end up destroying the very souls who push us forward. Democracy, unchecked, can become the gentle assassin of depth, danger, and destiny. And the society that fears greatness too much will never become great itself. All values must be revalued. Nietzsche doesn't want to fix the world. He wants to burn its moral foundations to ash. All values must be revalued, not questioned, not improved, overthrown, because the values we live by, good and evil, humility and pride, virtue and sin, were not born from truth. They were forged by fear, by weakness, by those who could not conquer, so they made conquest a sin. Our entire moral structure, Nietzsche says, is upside down. Strength is called arrogance. Desire is called sin. Power is called corruption. And why? Because the powerless rewrote the rules. They couldn't defeat the strong, so they demonized strength. They couldn't rise, so they called elevation immoral. And now we bow to those values without ever knowing they were forged in resentment, not truth. Revaluation is not a tweak. It is revolution. It's the act of dragging every sacred idea into the dirt and asking, who does this serve? Where did this come from? Does this make me more alive or more obedient? Nietzsche wants us to become moral alchemists, melting down inherited values to extract what is raw, real, and life-affirming. But most will never dare, because it means standing alone. It means killing your gods. It means betraying the very beliefs that once gave you comfort. It means carving new values from yourself, with no higher law to lean on if you fail. To revalue is to become dangerous, not to others, but to the world's illusions. It's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It's the sacred fire of becoming, because if your values weren't born from your deepest will, they were never yours to begin with. Suffering produces greatness. We are taught to avoid pain, to numb it, suppress it, medicate it. But Nietzsche declares the opposite. Suffering is not an obstacle to greatness. It is its womb. No hero is born from comfort. No genius rises from ease. Every towering soul has been shaped in fire, not despite their agony, but because of it. Suffering breaks you open. It strips away illusion. It burns through your lies. And in the ashes, if you dare to stand, something new begins to rise. Something stronger, sharper, more real. Nietzsche did not romanticize pain. He endured it. Crippling illness, exile, isolation, madness. He knew its weight, but he also saw what it could create. Suffering is the test. It asks, will you break or will you build? Most people run. They blame, they fold, they wait to be rescued. But the rare few, the ones who become, they take the wound and make it their forge. They do not just survive it, they use it. Suffering gives depth to art, courage to warriors, clarity to philosophers. It wakes you up when comfort has lulled you to sleep. It forces you to confront who you really are when no one is watching. It is the mirror that does not flatter, and the path through it is brutal, but it is also sacred. Because if you let it, suffering will not just scar you, it will sculpt you. And what remains after the pain is not just resilience, it is radiance. It is the kind of greatness that could never have been born from peace. Freedom is a useful illusion. We praise freedom like it's the highest virtue, the crown of modern life. We speak of free will, free choice, freedom of speech, freedom to be whoever we want. But Nietzsche stares straight through this glittering facade and tells us something few dare to whisper. Freedom is not real. It's a beautifully crafted illusion. Useful, yes, empowering even, but an illusion all the same. You feel free because you've been taught to feel free. You make choices, yes, but from what? From desires you didn't choose, from instincts, fears, cravings, and ideas that were planted in you long before you ever learned to speak. You were shaped by forces, genetic, cultural, psychological, that you cannot see, let alone control. Your opinions, inherited, your morals, taught, your preferences, conditioned, and yet you walk the world thinking, I chose this. But Nietzsche says, no, you were chosen by it. Even your rebellion, even your nonconformity, may just be a reaction built into your design. And yet, he does not mock freedom. He sees its power, because to believe in your freedom is to act as if your will matters. It gives you the courage to act, to break, to transform. That illusion has birthed revolutions, art, suffering, greatness. It pushes us to imagine we are the authors of our lives, and in that imagining, sometimes we become more than puppets. So Nietzsche doesn't want to kill the illusion. He wants you to see it, use it, bend it, because the greatest illusion of all is thinking you're free while being ruled by chains you don't even know you wear. Hatred hides admiration. Hatred feels like rejection, like disgust, like distance. But Nietzsche knew the truth lurking underneath it. Hatred is rarely pure. It is tainted, twisted. Often, it's just admiration in chains. When you hate someone with intensity, it's not always because they are beneath you, but because they possess something that unsettles you, something you secretly want, their strength, their freedom, their beauty, their fearlessness, their unapologetic presence. And so you hate, not because they offend your values, but because they threaten your image of yourself. Hatred can be a mirror we refuse to look into. It reflects what we lack, what we repress, what we gave up on. The person we hate is often the person we once dared to be or wish we could become. But that truth is unbearable, so we cover it with scorn, with ridicule, with righteous fury. It's easier to despise than to admit, they remind me of everything I buried. This is why hatred can be so obsessive, so personal. It haunts, it follows, it grows in the dark. It's not detachment, it's involvement, deep, painful involvement. And Nietzsche saw this clearly. The deepest hatred is never for strangers. It's for those who touch something unresolved within us. It's envy we won't name, longing we've locked away. To hate is human, but to understand what our hatred is pointing to, that is divine. Because once you see it clearly, hatred becomes a doorway, a brutal, burning clue to what still lives inside you. Not something weak, something waiting to be reborn. Pure motives are rare. We like to believe we act from goodness, from principle, from truth. That when we help, we're selfless. That when we speak, we're honest. That when we fight, we're righteous. But Nietzsche cuts through this polished lie with surgical cruelty. Pure motives are rare, if they exist at all. Behind nearly every noble act, there is a tangle of hidden hunger for power, for recognition, for control, for love, for revenge. You give to charity. Do you give for them or to feel like a better person? You defend the truth, but is it truth you serve or the thrill of being right? You sacrifice, but is it virtue or fear of being alone? Nietzsche doesn't say we are monsters. He says we are layered. And what terrifies us is not our evil, but the discovery that even our good may be selfish in disguise. This is why people cling to moral purity. It protects them from having to look inward. But Nietzsche refuses to let you look away. He wants you to see the cracks in your kindness, the ambition in your humility, the vanity in your compassion, not to shame you, but to free you. Because once you stop lying to yourself, your actions become yours, no longer inherited, no longer compulsive, no longer fake. You become the author of your own shadow. You begin to act not from borrowed ideals, but from something deeper, more dangerous, more real. Not purity, but power. Not sainthood, but selfhood. Because purity is a fantasy, and Nietzsche came to wake you up. Goodness often masks fear. We praise the good, the kind, the polite, the selfless. We tell ourselves they are pure, moral, righteous. But Nietzsche rips through that illusion and shows us what often hides beneath the halo. Fear, not virtue, not strength, just the desperate need to be accepted, to be safe, to avoid conflict, risk, and rejection. What we call good is frequently just obedience. What we call selfless is often self-erasure, not love of others, but fear of being unloved. This is not true goodness, it's survival. The person who never offends, who always agrees, who sacrifices endlessly may not be holy. They may just be afraid, afraid of their own will, afraid to say no, afraid to want more, to take up space, to assert a boundary. And so they wrap that fear in the language of virtue, humility, patience, forgiveness. But underneath, Nietzsche sees it trembling. He warns us, be careful who you call good. The soul that never challenges anything might not be peaceful, it might be paralyzed. True morality is not compliance, it is creation. It comes from inner strength, not from pleasing others. And sometimes, what looks like arrogance is actually courage. What feels like cruelty is someone choosing truth over comfort. Goodness becomes dangerous when it is just a mask, when it demands that we shrink ourselves to avoid judgment, when it punishes desire and demonizes strength. Nietzsche urges us to ask, Is this goodness or is this fear hiding in a costume? Because if your goodness requires you to disappear, it is not good at all. We crave meaning, not happiness. We're told to chase happiness, to seek pleasure, avoid pain, follow bliss. But Nietzsche calls this lie by its name. Happiness is not what we truly hunger for. It is fleeting, shallow, easily broken. What we crave, what we ache for, is meaning, not the comfort of a smile, but the gravity of a purpose, something worth bleeding for, something that justifies the suffering. You can be surrounded by comfort and still feel empty. You can have peace and still feel dead inside, because happiness without meaning is sugar. It fades fast, leaving you hollow. But when life means something, even agony becomes sacred. Even the hardest days feel earned. Meaning doesn't remove suffering, it transforms it. It carves pain into growth. It gives darkness a direction. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He didn't glorify misery. He glorified the strength it takes to endure it for something greater. He knew that people don't kill themselves because life is hard. They kill themselves when life is pointless, when the struggle has no story, when there's no reason behind the storm. That is what breaks the soul, not pain, but meaninglessness. This is why people will suffer for love, for art, for truth, why they'll walk through fire for something real, because we are not built for endless comfort. We are built to carry burdens that matter. And if you take away our meaning, even in paradise, we rot. We crave purpose like oxygen, because happiness is a moment, but meaning is a reason to stay alive. Self-deception is constant. You think you know yourself, you believe your thoughts are yours, your choices are rational, your beliefs earned. But Nietzsche peels back that fragile mask and shows you the truth. You are constantly lying to yourself. Not sometimes, always. Self-deception is not an accident. It is the engine of your sanity. You deceive yourself to survive, to function, to keep from collapsing under the weight of who you really are and what the world really is. You say you're moral, but how much of that is fear of judgment? You say you love, but how much is possession, loneliness, guilt? You say you want the truth, but can you handle it? Nietzsche believed the self is not a single thing, but a battleground of instincts, drives, masks, and the most dangerous one is the one that smiles back at you in the mirror, whispering, "This is who you truly are." But that voice is a story, a patchwork, a defense mechanism. We bury our chaos under personality. We turn our trauma into virtue. We suppress the unacceptable and call what's left me. Self-deception is not weakness, it is architecture. You've built your identity on half-truths that keep the deeper truths buried, because you have to, because too much awareness would break you. Nietzsche doesn't mock this, he marvels at it, the brilliance of the human mind to hide from itself so completely, but he also dares you to lift the veil, slowly, sharply, to see the lies you live by, and choose, consciously, whether to keep them, because the most terrifying question isn't, who am I? It's who have I been pretending to be? Familiar pain is comforting. We think we want happiness. We say we want change, but Nietzsche knew the darker truth. What we really crave, often without knowing it, is what's familiar, even if it hurts, even if it breaks us. Because familiar pain is safe, it's predictable, it doesn't surprise us. And in a world that feels chaotic and uncertain, the same heartbreak, the same failure, the same inner wound can feel like home. This is why people stay in toxic relationships, why they sabotage opportunities, why they repeat the same self-destructive choices and call it fate. Because deep down, the unknown terrifies us more than suffering. The unknown demands that we grow, that we risk, that we become, and many would rather cling to a pain they understand than face a freedom that demands reinvention. Nietzsche doesn't judge this, he reveals it. He shows us how we turn our trauma into identity, how we make our sorrow sacred, how we wrap our wounds in nostalgia and call it love. Because moving on means letting go, not just of others, but of who we were when we were hurting. And sometimes, pain is the only version of ourselves we truly recognize. The tragedy is not in the suffering, it's in the repetition, in the quiet addiction to heartbreak, in the choice to return to what already broke you, simply because it's known. Familiar pain is a lullaby whispered by fear, and until you choose the discomfort of change over the comfort of damage, you will stay loyal to your suffering and call it destiny. Despair reveals depth. Despair is not weakness. It is not failure. It is not something to be medicated, denied, or shamed. Nietzsche saw despair as something far more sacred, a sign that the soul has dared to go deep, that it has cracked through the surface distractions, the shallow games, the pretty lies, and touched something raw, unfiltered, and terrifyingly real. Despair means you've felt the weight of existence. It means you're awake. Those who have never despaired, never questioned, never broken, never bled meaning from their own silence, live on the surface. They know comfort, they know pleasure, but they do not know themselves. Depth comes at a cost, and that cost is often unbearable pain. Despair is not the end, it is the threshold. It is the darkness you must pass through when the world you built begins to fall apart, when the meanings you clung to disintegrate, when the gods you prayed to stay silent. And in that moment, you either turn away or you descend into yourself, into the abyss. And if you don't run, if you don't numb, something begins to stir, a new vision, a new strength, a self you didn't know you had. Despair is proof that your soul is alive, that you are no longer satisfied with illusions, that your suffering is asking for more truth, more courage, more becoming. Nietzsche knew only those who've tasted despair can rise with depth, because what breaks you, if it doesn't destroy you, remakes you into someone who can hold the unbearable and not look away. Pain is a teacher. Pain is not an accident. It is not a curse. It is not your enemy. Nietzsche saw what most flee from. Pain is a teacher, and not just any teacher. It is the only one that never lies. It strips away illusions, burns through denial, and brings you face to face with who you really are when comfort has abandoned you. Pain doesn't coddle. It reveals. It shows you where you're weak, where you've lied to yourself, where you've settled for less than what you were meant to become. When the heart breaks, when the dream fails, when the world turns cold, that is where the soul begins to wake up, not in peace, but in fire. Comfort breeds complacency, but pain forces transformation. You don't become stronger by being unbroken. You become stronger by walking through the ruins of everything you thought you needed and realizing you can survive without it. Nietzsche didn't glorify suffering for its own sake. He honored the growth it unlocks. Pain carves space inside you, space for wisdom, for empathy, for power. It shatters the version of you that was too small to hold your future, and though it hurts like hell, it teaches in a way no book, no sermon, no mentor ever could. People spend their lives trying to avoid pain, but those who dare to lean into it, who listen, who learn, they don't just heal, they evolve. Because pain doesn't just break you down. If you let it, pain becomes the sculptor of your most indestructible self. Anger signals powerlessness. Anger feels like strength. It surges, it burns, it makes us feel alive. But Nietzsche saw through its mask. Anger, he said, is not power. It is a signal of powerlessness. You are not angry when you are in control. You are not furious when you are free. Anger rises when your will is blocked, when your desires are denied, when something or someone reminds you that you are not in charge. The louder the rage, the deeper the helplessness underneath it. We lash out not from dominance, but from frustration. We shout when we cannot act. We blame when we cannot change. Anger is the scream of the caged will, wanting to move, to shape, to destroy or create, and being forced to wait, or worse, to submit. It is the energy of a soul that still wants, but cannot reach what it craves. Nietzsche didn't dismiss anger, he decoded it. He showed us that it is not a moral failure, but a cry from the soul. Something inside me knows it was meant for more, but it has been shackled. And instead of facing that pain, we clothe it in rage. We aim it at others, but the real battle is internal. If you trace your anger back to its roots, you will always find something you feel you've lost: control, love, dignity, meaning, and until you address that, you will keep exploding in cycles, mistaking fire for freedom. True strength does not scream. It acts. It creates. It reshapes the world. Anger is not your power. It is the sound of your power, trapped. Envy reveals desire. We're taught to hide it, to feel ashamed of it, to mask it behind judgment or indifference. But Nietzsche looks envy in the face and tells us the truth. Envy is not something to suppress. It's something to listen to, because envy at its core is not hatred. It's not bitterness. It's desire, unspoken, denied, unfulfilled. It's the aching recognition of something you want, but have not yet claimed as your own. You don't envy what you truly reject. You envy what calls to you. The artist envies the fearless. The lover envies the free. The silent envy the loud. The obedient envy the wild. And every time you feel that burn, that uncomfortable tightening when someone else shines, it's not because they've stolen your light. It's because they've awakened a part of you you've abandoned. Nietzsche doesn't tell you to drown your envy. He tells you to decode it, because in that uncomfortable heat lives a map to the life you secretly long for, the life you pretend you don't want, the self you've buried under duty, fear, or shame. Envy points with a shaking finger at your unlived potential, and that's why we're afraid of it, because once you admit it, you can't unsee it. You must choose: stay where you are or become the kind of person you envy. And that means risk. That means change. That means pain. But envy, if you let it, is not your enemy. It is your reflection. Distorted, yes, but honest. And sometimes it's the only voice left brave enough to whisper, that could be you. Say yes to life. In a world soaked with suffering, absurdity, betrayal, and death, Nietzsche does not ask you to escape. He asks you to do something far more radical. Say yes to life, not just to the pleasure, not just to the beauty, but to all of it. The pain, the fear, the confusion, the moments you wish never happened. Say yes to them too, because until you do, you are only half alive, hovering between resistance and regret, never fully here. To say yes to life is not optimism. It is not naive happiness. It is defiance. It is looking the chaos in the eye and saying, I will not flinch. It is embracing the storm with open arms and bloodied hands, knowing it might tear you apart, and loving it anyway. Because only when you stop trying to edit your existence do you begin to truly own it. Nietzsche knew that most people are waiting for life to get better, easier, safer. But the warrior, the artist, the creator, they do not wait. They affirm, even the heartbreak, even the horror, especially the horror. They don't ask, why did this happen to me? They say, let this become part of my fire. Saying yes to life is choosing to turn every scar into style, every failure into depth, every loss into fuel. It is the art of becoming not in spite of the pain, but because of it. And once you say yes, fully, wildly, unapologetically, you stop surviving life. You start becoming it. Seek intensity, not comfort. Comfort feels like safety, like rest, like peace. But Nietzsche warns that it's also a trap, a soft, silent trap that dulls your edge, slows your pulse, and slowly kills your hunger without you even noticing. He doesn't call you to happiness. He calls you to intensity, to live a life so sharp, so vivid, so electric, that it slices through the gray fog of routine and makes your heart remember what it means to burn. Comfort breeds stagnation. It flatters you into stillness. You stop reaching. You stop risking. You build a fortress around your fears and call it stability. But that fortress becomes your prison, and what you thought was peace was just a padded cell. Intensity, by contrast, is alive. It's dangerous. It demands something from you. It breaks your sleep. It shakes you awake. It may come through love or loss, rage or ecstasy, but it's always a surge. And in that surge, you find truth, not the calm, polished kind, but the raw, blood-soaked kind that changes you forever. Nietzsche believed the point of life wasn't to be comfortable, it was to be vital, to say yes to experience in its most extreme forms, to suffer beautifully, to love violently, to dream recklessly, because only in those extremes do you find the parts of yourself that safety never touches. Comfort asks you to survive, intensity dares you to become, and the life that chooses intensity may not last as long, but every second will burn brighter than years spent hiding from your own fire. Suffering is opportunity. Suffering is where most people stop. They shut down, numb out, beg for escape. But Nietzsche saw something far more dangerous and far more divine. He saw that suffering is not just pain, it is opportunity. Beneath every wound is a gate. Beneath every fall, a chance. Not the kind of chance life gives you, but the kind you create when everything else has been burned away. When you suffer, the mask drops. You see what matters and what never did. The illusions die. The roles crumble. You are left raw, exposed, real. And in that exposed place, you finally have the materials to rebuild, not as you were, but as someone entirely new, stronger not in spite of suffering, but because of it. This is the crucible where greatness is born, not comfort, not safety, suffering. Because when you suffer, the old version of you begins to break, and what feels like death is often just the end of your limits. If you stay in it, if you don't numb, don't run, don't collapse, you begin to evolve. Not immediately, not cleanly, but deeply, permanently. Nietzsche doesn't ask you to enjoy suffering. He asks you to use it, to see in it a violent invitation, to transform, to rise, to outgrow. Suffering reveals your hidden depths and dares you to shape them. And that is the secret most never learn. Suffering doesn't destroy you. It introduces you to your courage, to your vision, to your next self, only if you accept its brutal offer. Only if you say, "This will not break me, it will build me." Truth is born in conflict. Truth doesn't come softly. It doesn't arrive with peace or grace. Nietzsche knew that truth is born in conflict, in blood, in rupture, in the violent clash between what we believe and what is. Real truth breaks things. It tears through illusions we clung to like lifelines. It shatters the cozy lies we inherited. It rips off the masks we didn't even know we were wearing. If your truth didn't hurt you first, it's probably not real. We want truth to feel good. We want it to confirm us, to validate our stories. But the truth, the real kind, it almost always humiliates. It doesn't comfort. It exposes. It arrives when the soul is on fire, when certainty has failed, when the mind is exhausted from its own contradictions. It rises in the wreckage, not the calm. Nietzsche saw that the world's greatest revelations were born in personal wars, in inner collisions between desire and duty, between instinct and morality, between freedom and fear. The philosopher does not sit in peace. He bleeds. The artist does not create in calm. She breaks. And from that breaking, something truer than doctrine emerges, a raw, lived understanding that no system could teach. Conflict is the crucible. Without it, ideas remain soft, safe, dead. But when forced to collide, when your deepest beliefs are dragged into the arena and made to fight, you either evolve or you crumble. Either way, the truth is revealed, not given, not inherited, not agreed upon, fought for, and paid for in full. Joy tests. Philosophy is often forged in despair, in death, doubt, pain. But Nietzsche asks a question most philosophers fear. Can your philosophy survive joy? Anyone can build a worldview in suffering. But what about in light, in beauty, in ecstasy? Nietzsche believed that real philosophy is not tested by how it holds up under pain, but by how it responds to joy. Can it embrace life when it's burning bright, or does it shrink, become suspicious, retreat back into safety? Joy is not shallow. It is not naive. It is the final test, because joy demands vulnerability. It demands presence. It rips away cynicism and forces you to feel, truly feel. And if your beliefs cannot handle that, if they can't breathe in the sunlight, then they were never about truth. They were about protection, about hiding. Many philosophies are built as fortresses, cold, rigid, defensive. They explain everything but celebrate nothing. They survive darkness but cannot dance. And Nietzsche could not bear a philosophy that only made sense when you were broken. He wanted a philosophy that could laugh, that could sing, that could shout, yes, at the height of life's chaos, and still remain whole. If your worldview collapses in joy, it was never rooted in life. It was rooted in fear. Nietzsche knew joy doesn't make philosophy unnecessary. It proves its worth. The joy that blinds the shallow illuminates the deep. So the next time you feel joy, don't run, don't question it. Ask your philosophy, can you stay with me here? If not, it's time to create one that can. Live what you read. Nietzsche didn't write for spectators. He didn't write for those who highlight, quote, nod, and return safely to routine. He wrote for those willing to bleed with the text, to wrestle it, to live it, because reading without transformation is masturbation of the mind, pleasurable but impotent. Words for Nietzsche are not decorations for thought. They are detonators, and unless they explode something inside you, you haven't read them. You've skimmed them. Live what you read. If an idea stings, let it scar you. If a truth haunts you, follow it into the dark. If a sentence makes your chest tighten, don't look away. Most people read to escape. Nietzsche read and wrote to confront. His words are not answers. They're torches, and if you carry them, they will set fire to everything false within you. You cannot read about courage and stay a coward. You cannot study freedom while living in chains. You cannot quote Nietzsche between small talk and scrolling. He despised the thinker who speaks of self-overcoming, yet never dares a single act of transformation. To live what you read is to walk out of your mind and into your life different. It means taking the idea off the page and injecting it into your blood. It means destroying the distance between who you admire and who you are. It's dangerous, it's disruptive, but it's the only kind of reading that matters. Otherwise, you're just collecting words, not living them. Create your own destiny. Nietzsche did not believe in fate as a script written in the stars. He believed in destiny as something forged, with blood, fire, will. You are not here to follow a path. You are here to carve one, to become the sculptor of your own soul. The moment you wait for a sign, for permission, for some divine hand to guide you, you've already surrendered your power. Nietzsche demands more. He demands creation. Your destiny is not found. It is not given. It is taken. And it begins the instant you stop asking, "What should I do?" and start declaring, "This is who I will become." Not because it's safe, not because it's easy, but because no one else could live that life but you. Creation is brutal. It means killing your comfort. It means disappointing expectations. It means rising every time you're crushed and still choosing forward. This is why Nietzsche scorns those who float, who drift, who wait for meaning to reveal itself. Meaning is not found. Meaning is made. Destiny is not a fate to accept. It's a flame you have to ignite. It takes work, chaos, courage. It takes staring into everything that told you you can't and saying, "Watch me." The gods are gone. The rules are broken. The world is blank clay. And Nietzsche's challenge is merciless and liberating. Do not live the life you were handed. Create the life that only you can give birth to. That is your destiny, not waiting for something to change, but becoming the force that changes everything. Trust instinct over systems. We are raised to worship systems, religions, ideologies, bureaucracies, academic frameworks. They promise order, predictability, meaning. But Nietzsche saw what systems truly are, cages disguised as maps. They seduce you with certainty but slowly drain your vitality. They make you obedient, not wise, predictable, not powerful. And Nietzsche's rebellion is simple and radical. Trust instinct over systems, because your instinct is alive. Systems are not. Your instinct knows what no theory ever will. Systems are dead things trying to organize the living. They reduce the chaos of life into rules, labels, categories. But instinct, raw, untamed, dangerous, is the pulse of your becoming. It is the voice before language, the movement before thought. It is truth that doesn't need permission. And every time you ignore it to follow a system, something inside you hardens, fades, dies. Nietzsche didn't trust the moralist, the academic, the priest. He trusted the dancer, the warrior, the artist, the ones who move from the gut. Because instinct is risk. It doesn't justify itself. It simply acts. And yes, it may lead you into mistakes, into pain, but it also leads you to creation, freedom, and transformation. Systems will always be safer, but they cannot birth greatness. They can only preserve mediocrity. Your instinct, however, wild and wordless, is dangerous precisely because it's real. It's your flame, your edge, your hidden God. To follow it is to betray the herd, but to ignore it is to betray yourself. Enemies are necessary. We are taught to avoid conflict, to make peace, to be agreeable. But Nietzsche saw through that mask of civility. He understood something deeper, more ancient, more vital. You need enemies, not because hatred is noble, but because struggle is. An enemy reveals your strength. An enemy sharpens your will. Without resistance, without friction, without someone standing in your way, you don't grow, you rot. Comfort makes you soft. Agreement makes you dull. But an enemy awakens you. They force you to define yourself. They push you into clarity. They challenge what you believe, what you value, what you stand for. And in that challenge, you either collapse or rise. Enemies are not always villains. Sometimes they are mirrors. Sometimes they are the brutal hand that molds you into who you were, too afraid to become on your own. Nietzsche did not mean petty hatred. He meant necessary opposition, a worthy adversary, the one who calls out your weakness, who tests your limits, who makes you earn your strength. Without that, you stagnate. You chase approval. You become hollow and safe and small. But with enemies, you are forged. You are formed. He understood what the modern world tries to forget. A soul without enemies is a soul without edges, without urgency, without fire. You don't become strong by being accepted. You become strong by being opposed. So if you find yourself with enemies, don't flinch. Don't run. Say thank you, because your enemies are not in the way of your becoming. They are the proof that you are becoming at all. Powerless virtue is empty. We praise the kind, the humble, the forgiving. We lift up virtue like a crown. But Nietzsche pierces through the applause and asks the question no one dares. What is virtue worth if it comes from weakness? If you forgive only because you cannot strike back, are you merciful or just helpless? If you're kind only because you fear conflict, are you good or just afraid? Virtue without power is not noble. It's hollow. It's theater, a performance for safety, not a mark of strength. Real virtue is a choice. It comes after power. The lion who doesn't kill, even though it could, that's restraint, that's meaning. But the lamb who preaches peace was never a threat to begin with. Its virtue is not born of strength. It is born of necessity. It is passive. And Nietzsche knew there is nothing sacred in what you do because you must. Sacred is what you choose to do despite having every option. Powerless virtue demands no courage. It costs nothing. But power, true power, tested and tamed, that is where character is revealed. You are not good if you are incapable of harm. You are good if you are capable, and you refuse, not out of fear, out of will. The world teaches you to be soft first. Nietzsche dares you to become strong and then decide who you want to be, because until you possess power, your virtue is not yours. It's just a story you tell yourself to survive. The abyss gazes back. Nietzsche's most haunting warning isn't shouted. It's whispered, like a curse that echoes forever. When you gaze long into the abyss also gazes into you. At first glance, it sounds poetic, but it's not a metaphor. It's a psychological law. When you confront darkness, evil, chaos, suffering, not from a distance but face to face, you risk something far greater than fear. You risk becoming it. To fight monsters, you must understand them, and in understanding, something opens, something dangerous, because the more you stare into what is twisted, the more those shadows begin to recognize you. The more you dissect cruelty, the more you feel its pulse in your own hands. The more you study the abyss, the despair, the nihilism, the brutality, the more it studies you. You start out noble, brave, intent on saving the world, but if you're not careful, the thing you hate begins to find a home inside you. Righteousness hardens into rage. Justice twists into vengeance. Conviction curdles into obsession. The line between you and the abyss dissolves, and you don't even notice because you still believe you're the hero. Nietzsche's warning is not to avoid darkness, but to enter it aware, to remember who you are before it devours your name, because when the abyss looks into you, it doesn't see a warrior. It sees an invitation, a crack, a chance to make a home, and if you forget yourself long enough, it takes you, quietly, completely, until the darkness you were fighting becomes the face you see in the mirror. Madness is individual. Sanity is herd. Madness terrifies us. It's the line we fear crossing, the loss of reason, control, acceptance. But Nietzsche flips the lens entirely. He says, madness is often the price of individuality, while sanity is the reward for obedience. What we call sanity may not be truth. It may just be agreement, the collective script, the shared delusion, the easy lie that keeps society smooth and silent. When someone sees differently, feels more deeply, breaks the mold, they are labeled mad, not because they are sick, but because they no longer fit. Their thoughts are too sharp, their questions too loud. They don't believe what they're told, and they refuse to nod along. And that makes them dangerous. Society doesn't fear madness. It fears the non-conforming soul, the one who breaks rhythm, who threatens the fragile myth of order. Sanity, Nietzsche warns, is often just consensus. You are sane because you think like the herd, fear like the herd, consume like the herd. You are sane because you comply. You believe in what's popular, acceptable, digestible, even if it makes you numb inside. But madness, real madness, is often a raw, unfiltered truth. It's seeing what others can't yet bear to see, feeling what they've spent lifetimes trying to suppress. Nietzsche's madmen are not broken. They are prophets, artists, visionaries, too awake for a sleeping world, and though they walk alone, shaking, scorched by the sun of their own thoughts, they carry the burden of becoming, because the herd will always crucify what it cannot understand and call it sanity. Mediocrity is the true danger. We are trained to fear failure, scandal, disgrace, but Nietzsche warns us of something far more insidious: mediocrity, not loud, not violent, but dull, slowly suffocating the soul with comfort, safety, and the praise of the average. Mediocrity is the death that doesn't scream. It flatters you for fitting in. It rewards you for shrinking. It tells you you're doing well while your dreams rot quietly beneath the floorboards of a life that asks nothing of you. Mediocrity never shocks, it never offends, it never reaches too far, risks too much, loves too deeply. It wears the mask of stability, but inside it is emptiness. No art, no fire, no danger, just polite applause for the unremarkable. And the worst part, it's contagious. It seduces you with peace, then punishes any hunger for more. The ones who dare to rise above it, who speak too boldly, burn too brightly, are labeled arrogant, dangerous, wrong. Nietzsche didn't fear the villain, he feared the crowd, the herd, the slow, grinding pressure to be less than you are, to settle, to soften, to obey. Because once mediocrity becomes the norm, greatness is not just rare, it's hated, it's mocked, and the world becomes a place where no one rises, not because they can't, but because they've forgotten how. The danger is not failure. The danger is never trying, never burning, never breaking the shell of just fine. Nietzsche's cry is clear. You were not born to be acceptable. You were born to be unforgettable. Mediocrity is not safe. It is the silent killer of everything divine in you. Light can blind, we worship light. We chase clarity, truth, enlightenment, as if light is always salvation. But Nietzsche warns with quiet fury. Light can blind just as much as darkness can hide. Too much exposure doesn't free you. It overwhelms you. It sears the soul. There are truths so harsh, so raw, that the mind recoils. There is clarity so piercing, it becomes cruelty. And in the name of seeing everything, we forget how to feel anything. We think light is always good, but light unfiltered reveals everything. Every flaw, every scar, every secret we needed to stay hidden just a little longer. It strips us bare before we are ready. And sometimes what we call illumination is actually an attack, a forcing, a violation of mystery, of rhythm, of becoming. Nietzsche knew some truths must be earned, not dragged into view. Wisdom doesn't come from bathing in light. It comes from dancing between shadow and flame. Too much light can sterilize the soul. It can lead to cold rationality, disconnected intellect, the arrogance of the all-knowing. And that arrogance is blind in its own way, blind to nuance, to beauty, to the quiet places where meaning lives. Not all things bloom under the sun. Some truths grow in the dark, slowly, fiercely, and to flood them with light too soon is to kill them. Nietzsche reminds us, don't trust the brightness just because it shines. Sometimes the most blinding force in the world isn't darkness. It's truth, shown too fast, too hard, too loud. Because even the sun can burn you alive. Virtue can be vice. We wrap ourselves in virtue like armor, kindness, humility, loyalty, forgiveness, and we wear it with pride, convinced it makes us good. But Nietzsche peels back the layers and exposes a disturbing truth. Virtue can be vice in disguise. Not all goodness is good. Sometimes it's cowardice. Sometimes it's vanity. Sometimes it's a desperate need to be loved, to be seen as noble, while hiding the rot that festers underneath. Kindness can be weakness when it's afraid to speak truth. Humility can be self-hatred dressed in moral language. Loyalty can become submission to mediocrity. Forgiveness, when forced, can protect the abuser and silence the wound. Virtues repeated blindly, without soul, become masks. And Nietzsche's fury wasn't for evil, it was for the lie of goodness, the fake holiness that parades through the world, doing harm while smiling sweetly. He understood that many people cling to virtue not because they are strong, but because they are terrified of their own power. They need rules, they need praise, they need to silence their hunger and disguise their rage, so they polish their restraint and call it moral. But inside, something withers. The parts of them that could become fierce, beautiful, real, are buried under the weight of what they should be. Nietzsche doesn't tell you to reject virtue, he tells you to test it. Ask yourself, is this goodness or is this fear pretending to be pure? Because when virtue becomes performance, when it demands you cut yourself to fit someone else's mold, It's no longer holy. It's a slow, smiling poison. The world is morally neutral. We want the universe to care, to reward the good, punish the wicked, make meaning of our pain. But Nietzsche offers no such comfort. He drags us into the brutal heart of reality and whispers, the world is morally neutral. There is no cosmic justice, no invisible hand tipping the scales, no divine scorekeeper watching your choices. The sun rises for the saint and the murderer alike. The earthquake does not ask who deserves to live. We scream, why me? But the world doesn't answer, because it doesn't speak. It simply is. Storms don't hate. Flowers don't forgive. Nature doesn't recognize virtue. It devours without malice and births without blessing. We bleed in accidents. We rise through cruelty. And still, we beg for fairness, because to accept this neutrality feels unbearable. Nietzsche forces us to see what we hide from. If there is no built-in meaning, no moral law, then the weight of value falls entirely on us. We cannot rely on heaven to balance what earth destroys. We cannot wait for karma to undo injustice. We must create meaning where there is none, forge values in a world that doesn't care if we do. This isn't despair, it's freedom, because once you stop expecting the universe to be good, you can begin to become good, not out of fear, not for reward, but because you choose it. That is the terrifying and holy task Nietzsche hands you. In a world without moral structure, will you build your own? The world owes you nothing, so what will you give it anyway? Shape suffering, don't escape it. Suffering comes for everyone. It is not a question of if, only when. And in a world obsessed with ease, with comfort, with numbing the ache, Nietzsche demands something harder. Don't escape your suffering. Shape it, mold it, use it, because pain avoided becomes poison, but pain transformed becomes power. You are not meant to run from your wounds. You are meant to forge them into something holy. Modern life sells you every escape, distractions, substances, silence, lies, but none of it heals. It only delays, it only hides. The wound remains, festering, whispering, waiting, and the more you run, the louder it becomes. Nietzsche offers a different path. Turn around, face it, not like a victim, but like an artist, like a blacksmith, like a god learning how to make fire from their own broken bones. When you shape your suffering, it no longer owns you. It becomes your tool, your voice, your vision. It deepens your art, sharpens your insight, expands your soul. People who never suffer deeply rarely know deeply. They float, but those who've sat with agony, who've listened to its lessons, they carry a weight that bends them into something unforgettable. Suffering is not the enemy, it's the raw material of greatness, and those who learn to shape it, who refuse to let it crush them, who dare to give it meaning, become something else entirely, something forged, not found, because you were never meant to escape the fire. You were meant to walk into it and come out with something only you could create. Deep souls carry scars. There is a heaviness in certain people, an ache behind the eyes, a silence in their presence that speaks louder than words. Nietzsche understood this quiet gravity. Deep souls carry scars, not because they are broken, but because they have dared to feel, to dive into the chaos, to stay in the fire when others ran. Their depth was not inherited. It was earned in suffering, in solitude, in the relentless work of becoming. A shallow life avoids pain. It skims the surface, fears silence, distracts itself with noise. But a deep soul sinks. It grieves without apology. It questions the meaning of everything. It walks alone into truths that most people will never face, and it pays the price. These people don't wear their wounds like trophies. They carry them quietly, like maps of where they've been and who they had to lose to survive. The deeper the soul, the darker the journey. And Nietzsche knew you cannot descend into yourself without being marked, without leaving something behind, without bleeding. These scars aren't signs of weakness. They're proof of birth, of transformation, of the many deaths a person must die before they can call themselves alive. But in those scars, there is power, not in spite of the pain, but through it. Deep souls love deeper, create deeper, see the world with a kind of clarity that only pain can sharpen, and though they carry sorrow, they also carry fire, because what scarred them didn't kill them, it forged them, and now they walk the world, not healed, but unbreakable. Idealism masks cowardice. Idealism wears the face of purity. It speaks in absolutes: justice, peace, truth, love. It claims the moral high ground, floats above the mess of reality, and proclaims how the world should be. But Nietzsche saw through the light and into the shadow. Idealism, he warns, is often not courage. It is cowardice wrapped in holy words. It is the fear of engaging with the brutal, complex, terrifying real. It is the refusal to get your hands dirty, to risk, to choose, to act. The idealist dreams but never builds, criticizes but never creates. They imagine perfection but recoil at the cost of making anything real, because reality requires compromise. It requires facing failure, betrayal, blood, and the idealist, terrified of imperfection, retreats into theory, into slogans, into noble distance. They call it principle, but often it's fear. Nietzsche knew that the truly brave don't chase utopias. They stand in the mud of now. They shape meaning with imperfect hands. They risk being wrong, being hated, being changed. Idealism says, this world is not worthy of me, but courage says, I will still shape it. Idealism can become a hiding place for the soul that cannot stomach contradiction, that cannot forgive life for being what it is. It becomes armor for those too frightened to face the chaos head-on, because if you can dream the perfect world forever, you never have to face the suffering of this one. Idealism doesn't always rise from love. It often rises from fear, and the ones who change the world are not the pure. They are the brave. Humans are not rational. We flatter ourselves with reason. We build monuments to logic, write laws in its name, believe that our decisions are shaped by thought, evidence, clarity. But Nietzsche strikes the illusion where it lives. Humans are not rational. We are instinct in disguise, emotion in armor, desire wearing the mask of reason. What we call thinking is often nothing more than justification for what we already want or fear or refuse to see. We don't choose the best idea. We choose the one that feels right, the one that protects us, the one that confirms who we believe we are. We vote, argue, pray, love, not because it makes sense, but because it feels something deeper, older, and often unconscious. And then, like clever liars, we invent reasons to make it all seem deliberate, orderly, rational. Nietzsche saw this clearly. Our logic is often a slave, not a guide. Our truths are shaped by the wounds we carry, the power we seek, the fears we can't name. Even philosophers, the supposed guardians of reason, are, he said, nothing more than advocates disguised as discoverers. Their systems don't reveal the world. They reveal themselves. To understand humanity, Nietzsche demands that we go below reason, to the roots, to the instincts, to the drives, and until we do, we will keep mistaking rationalization for clarity and conformity for truth. We are not logical beings that occasionally feel. We are feeling beings that occasionally pretend to be logical, and until we accept that, we'll keep building fragile truths on foundations that were never rational to begin with. Power creates, not just destroys. We are taught to fear power, to see it as corrupt, brutal, violent. Power crushes, power takes, power dominates. But Nietzsche offers a deeper, more dangerous truth. Real power does not just destroy, it creates, it builds, it dares, it gives form to chaos. Power is not merely the fist that breaks, it is the will that shapes, and without it, nothing new can be born. Most people confuse power with tyranny because they've only seen it misused. But power, at its core, is the ability to bring something into existence. The artist wields power. The thinker, the leader, the lover who refuses to shrink. They are all creators through force of will. Weakness protects what already exists. But power says, this is not enough. It imagines something more and then makes it real. This is why Nietzsche calls for the will to power, not to dominate others, but to transcend limitation, the power to rise from trauma, the power to build a new identity from ruin, the power to create meaning in a meaningless world. That kind of power isn't cruel, it's sacred, but it demands risk, it demands solitude, it demands that you stop asking for permission. The truly powerful do not need to destroy to feel alive. They create because they are, because something within them burns to give shape to the void. And that is what Nietzsche understood better than anyone. Power is not the end of morality. It is the beginning of creation. Genius obeys instinct. We imagine genius as meticulous, methodical, slow-burning intellect, careful plans, calculated brilliance. But Nietzsche throws that image into the fire and reveals something raw, untamed, and far more dangerous. Genius obeys instinct. True creation does not come from analysis. It erupts from the gut, from the unconscious, from something deeper than thought, something primal, holy, and impossible to fake. The genius does not ask, is this right? They ask, does this burn? They move without permission. They do not explain. They do not wait. They trust the chaos inside them more than the rules around them. While others pause to perfect, the genius acts, and in that fearless obedience to their own instinct, they unlock what no one else can reach. This is why the genius often looks mad, reckless, dangerous, because they are not filtering their truth through social acceptability or intellectual approval. They are channeling what most people suppress. They are the storm, not the umbrella, and their power lies not in logic, but in alignment with themselves, with the moment, with the pulse of something larger than reason. Nietzsche knew that real brilliance doesn't arise from control. It comes from surrender, from letting the unconscious speak in color, in sound, in violence, in grace. And the one who listens, truly listens, to that inner fire becomes not just intelligent, but necessary, a force. Because genius is not about thinking harder, it's about trusting deeper. And in a world that worships caution, the one who dares to obey instinct becomes divine. Creation demands destruction. We love the beauty of creation, the birth of art, the spark of innovation, the rise of something new. But Nietzsche knew the hidden truth most deny. Every act of creation begins in destruction. You cannot give life to something new without killing something old. You cannot evolve without tearing down the self that clings to comfort. Growth is not peaceful, it is violent. To become, you must first unravel. You must burn the bridges to who you were. You must betray the values that no longer serve you. You must shatter the beliefs that once kept you safe, but now keep you small. Creation is not gentle. It is not polite. It is war inside the soul, between what you've been told to be and what you must become. This is why so many never create. Not truly, because to create is to destroy the roles you play, the lies you tell, the masks you wear. It's to lose control. It's to make space, not by addition, but by annihilation. And that space hurts. It feels like loss, like madness, like death. But within it, something stirs, raw, untamed, real. Nietzsche doesn't romanticize this. He demands it. He says, you want to create? Then destroy. Break the pattern. Burn the false virtue. Kill the cowardice you call peace. Creation will cost you your comfort, but in return, it gives you truth. Because nothing truly new can grow in the soil of what you refuse to bury, and the future you ache to become, it's waiting in the ashes. Truth without power is weak. We are taught to believe that truth is sacred, that if something is true, it must shine, conquer, stand tall on its own. But Nietzsche breaks that illusion with terrifying clarity. Truth without power is weak. It can be ignored, mocked, buried beneath noise and fear. A truth without force behind it becomes nothing more than a whisper in a storm, and the world is not changed by whispers. Truth does not win because it's right. It wins because someone fights for it, because someone dares to speak it when it costs them everything, because someone gives it muscle, with action, with risk, with blood. And when no one is willing to bear that weight, truth decays into trivia, into quiet facts that die in silence. Nietzsche saw that the powerless cling to truth as if it's enough, as if reality will bend just because you know something deeply. But knowledge without courage is hollow. Insight without will is inert. The truth does not move the world. The one who wields it does. This is why revolutions fail when they're led by thinkers who won't bleed, why wisdom is trampled by those with louder voices and stronger hands, because the truth is not self-sufficient. It needs a carrier, a vessel, a warrior who dares to embody it. And Nietzsche's warning is brutal. If you believe something truly, then fight for it, build it, speak it in fire, because truth that doesn't move men, doesn't break chains, doesn't create, is already dead. Power is beauty. We are told beauty is softness, elegance, harmony. We are told it is delicate, passive, something to be looked at, not touched. But Nietzsche spits on that lie. He saw beauty not in frailty, but in power, raw, unapologetic, radiating from the soul like fire. Beauty is not weakness. It is strength in form. It is presence that commands without begging. It is will made visible. Power is beauty because it does not ask. It declares. The lion does not wonder if it is majestic. The storm does not apologize for its thunder. True beauty is not shaped by approval. It ignores it. It exists because it must. It moves through the world with danger and grace, and people stare not because it's pretty, but because it cannot be controlled. Nietzsche knew the beautiful is not always soft. It can be terrifying. It can shake you. It can expose you. And that's why real beauty is rare, because most people are trained to hide their power, to make themselves small, digestible, forgettable. But when someone owns their full force, when their presence takes up all the space at once, that is when beauty becomes unforgettable, divine. Power is beauty because it reveals life at its highest. The dancer who owns the stage, the thinker who bends the room, the lover who burns through your skin, not because they conform, but because they refuse to. That's the beauty Nietzsche honored, not the polite, not the polished, but the kind that dares to exist, fully, fiercely, the kind that doesn't need your permission to shine. Art transcends truth. We are taught to worship truth, cold, hard, objective, as if truth is the highest form of value. But Nietzsche saw deeper. He saw that truth alone is not enough to live, that facts by themselves are lifeless. Art transcends truth, not by denying it, but by making it bearable, by making it beautiful, because truth can kill. It can crush the spirit with its indifference, its brutality. But art takes that same truth and transforms it into something human, something we can touch, feel, love. Art doesn't ask, is this accurate? It asks, does this matter? It doesn't dissect reality. It reimagines it. It gives suffering a shape. It gives chaos rhythm. It gives death a melody we can hum as we march toward it. Where philosophy defines, art reveals. Where science explains, art redeems. And in that act of redemption, it becomes more powerful than truth itself. Nietzsche knew that people don't die for facts. They die for songs, for symbols, for stories. Truth shows you the abyss, but art teaches you how to dance beside it, how to scream, how to sing, how to survive it without becoming stone. That's why he believed the artist was holier than the priest, braver than the scholar, because the artist doesn't flinch. They take truth in its rawest form and make it beautiful enough to live with. So yes, truth matters, but it is art that saves us, not because it lies, but because it knows a deeper law. We don't live for truth, we live for what we can feel in the face of it. Philosophers must be poets. We imagine philosophers as cold, clinical minds, dissecting truth with scalpels of logic, building grand systems like machines. But Nietzsche breaks that illusion with a single vital truth. A true philosopher must be a poet, because truth, real truth, cannot be caged in formulas. It cannot be proven. It must be felt, tasted, endured, and only poetry has the power to hold that kind of flame without killing it. Philosophy that bleeds, that sings, that trembles, that is the only kind worth following. Nietzsche wrote like a prophet in flames because he knew reason alone cannot reach the soul. You can explain life to death and still not live, but one line of poetry, burning with honesty, can shatter your illusions and rebuild your being in a single breath. The philosopher who cannot move you has said nothing. The one who burns you changes you forever. Logic may order the world, but poetry reveals it. It captures contradiction. It honors chaos. It dares to speak in images when language fails. And Nietzsche saw that the world is not made of answers. It's made of wounds, longing, laughter, and grief. Only the poet-philosopher can hold it all. This is why Nietzsche's words don't just explain, they haunt. They don't tell you what to think. They set something alive inside you that cannot be undone. A true philosopher doesn't just argue. He dances, he bleeds, he sings the truth so fiercely it echoes inside your bones. Because philosophy that does not touch the soul is not wisdom, it's paperwork. Greatness offends. Greatness does not fit. It does not blend in. It does not apologize. And that is why it offends. Nietzsche knew that the truly great are not loved at first. They are feared, mocked, attacked, because greatness threatens the comfortable order of things. It exposes mediocrity. It reminds others of what they could have become, but didn't. It is a mirror that reflects both potential and failure. The herd praises humility, sameness, predictability. But greatness is unpredictable. It dares. It breaks rules. It dares to say, I am not like you, and the world cannot stand that. The moment someone rises above the crowd sharpens its knives. They call it arrogance. They call it dangerous. But what they really mean is, you remind me of everything I'm afraid to be. Greatness doesn't seek permission. It moves. It creates. It changes the air in the room, and that disruption makes people uncomfortable, not because greatness is wrong, but because it is alive, and aliveness is threatening in a world that thrives on numbness. Nietzsche understood that if no one is offended by you, you're probably not saying anything real. You're probably still playing small, because truth offends, vision offends, power offends, not because it's evil, but because it reveals what others deny in themselves. So, if you walk your path and draw no fire, ask yourself, is this path really mine, or was it built to please? Because the mark of real greatness isn't praise, it's resistance, it's friction, and it means you're finally becoming something that can't be ignored. Artists are future priests. The age of gods is ending. The temples are quiet. The old prayers fall flat in modern mouths. And Nietzsche saw what comes next. Not more saints, not more sermons, but something raw, alive, dangerous. The artist, not as entertainer, not as decorator, but as priest. The one who brings meaning to a disenchanted world. The one who doesn't worship the divine, but creates it. In a world where truth has shattered, where God is dead, where morality decays into slogans, the artist becomes sacred, not because they preserve what was, but because they dare to shape what will be. They give chaos form. They birth myths from madness. They give the soul what it can no longer find in doctrine, awe, shock, transcendence, feeling. Artists are the priests of the future because they do what religion once did. They guide the inner life. They offer communion with beauty, with pain, with mystery. They take your suffering and sculpt it into something holy. They take your silence and explode it into color, sound, language that touches something even you didn't know you were starving for. Nietzsche knew people don't need more rules. They need vision, ecstasy, reflection. They need someone to light the dark and say, this too is part of you. And no one does that like the artist who bleeds honestly onto the page, the canvas, the stage, not with dogma, not with commandments, but with creation, because the artist doesn't point to heaven. They build new heavens and dare you to enter. Style is forged in pain. Style is not decoration. It is not a flourish added to impress. Nietzsche knew the brutal truth. Style is forged in pain. It is the shape your soul takes after it has been broken and rebuilt. It is the scar that doesn't fade, but learns how to speak. The most unforgettable style doesn't come from ease. It comes from endurance, from surviving, from turning agony into form, chaos into rhythm, bleeding into beauty. Every true artist, thinker, creator, those who leave a mark, carry a style that was born in the fire. It's not about polish. It's about authenticity carved through suffering. Pain strips you down. It removes the imitation, the pretense, the borrowed voice. And what's left, raw, trembling, real, is where your style begins. Not chosen, but discovered. Not crafted, but revealed under pressure. This is why style resonates, why we feel it before we understand it, because we recognize truth shaped by suffering. We hear the rhythm of someone who didn't just think, they felt. Someone who paid the price of their voice with silence, exile, heartbreak. Their style is not there to dazzle, it is there to survive. Nietzsche didn't believe in shallow elegance. He believed in style that bleeds, that bites, that lingers like smoke in the lungs, because only the soul that has suffered deeply enough can speak in a way that cuts through the noise of the world. Style is not what you wear, it is what you carry from the fire, and if it doesn't burn, it won't last. Doubt everything to think. We are taught that thinking means knowing, that intelligence is built on certainty, on conclusions, on facts, on answers. But Nietzsche flips that illusion on its head. He knew the real engine of thought isn't knowledge, it's doubt. To truly think, you must first unthink. You must tear down every truth you inherited, every value you swallowed, every belief you never questioned, because if you don't doubt it, it doesn't belong to you. Doubt is not weakness, it is birth. It is the crack in the wall where the light of freedom enters. Nietzsche understood that most people never think at all. They just agree with their parents, their culture, their religion, their fears. They confuse repetition with understanding. But the thinker, the real thinker, sets fire to comfort. They destroy before they build. They ask, what if everything I believe is a lie? And they stay in that terrifying silence long enough to hear what emerges. Doubt demands courage, because once you begin, there is no going back. You lose the safety of certainty. You lose the applause of the herd. You lose your innocence. But in return, you gain something holy, the right to shape your own mind, your own values, your own vision of life. Nietzsche's demand is merciless. Do not think because you're told to. Think because you must. Strip everything down to the bone. Doubt not just the world, but yourself, especially yourself, because that's where real thinking begins, not in answers, in the terrifying, liberating fire of the question. Contradictions reveal depth. We are taught to fear contradiction, to see it as failure, as weakness, as a flaw in thinking. But Nietzsche knew better. Contradictions do not mean confusion. They mean complexity. They are the cracks where truth breathes. The deeper a soul, the more opposing forces it must hold. Light and shadow, rage and love. strength and vulnerability. Simplicity is for cowards. Contradiction is for those brave enough to contain more than one truth at once. The shallow live in certainty. They pick a side, hold it like a weapon, and refuse to budge. But the ones who have lived, who have lost, fallen, risen again, know that life doesn't fit into clean lines. Real thinking doesn't settle. It wrestles, it bleeds, it contradicts itself because it dares to tell the whole truth, not just the digestible part. Nietzsche himself was full of contradiction. He praised solitude, yet longed for connection. He exalted power, yet was frail and ill. He tore down morality, yet burned with a sense of purpose. These contradictions weren't accidents. They were marks of depth, proof that his soul was too wide, too alive, to be reduced to one note. You are not weak because you contradict yourself. You are not lost because you are pulled in different directions. You are rich. You are full. The more you contain, the more you are. And Nietzsche's voice reminds you, don't erase your contradictions to be consistent. Embrace them. They are the echo of something vast inside you trying to be heard. Logic is cultural. We believe logic is universal, clean, timeless, untouchable by bias, a perfect machine for truth. But Nietzsche tears that illusion apart with surgical rage. Logic is not eternal. It is not objective. It is cultural, a tool invented, shaped, and limited by human hands, by history, by values, by fear. Logic is not a divine gift. It's a habit of thought born in a particular world for a particular kind of mind. The Greeks made logic sacred. They wanted order. They feared chaos. So they built systems. If this, then that. A is A. No contradiction. No paradox. But Nietzsche knew the world doesn't obey those rules. Life is contradiction. Life is motion, madness, collision. Logic simplifies. It slices the wild mess of existence into manageable pieces. It gives the illusion of control. But in doing so, it excludes too much. It forgets the blood, the poetry, the scream, and more dangerously, logic becomes a weapon. Cultures use it to claim superiority. We are rational. You are primitive. Our truth is logical. Yours is emotion. But behind this mask of neutrality is just another value system, one that fears instinct, that sanitizes the soul, that worships structure while crushing spirit. Nietzsche doesn't want you to reject logic. He wants you to unmask it, to see it not as truth, but as one way among many, a lens, not the light, a creation, not a commandment. Logic is a language, but it cannot speak for the entire universe, because what lives beyond it, chaos, beauty, becoming, cannot be trapped in a cage of if and then. No idea is sacred. We cling to ideas like lifeboats, beliefs about truth, love, justice, identity. We defend them, worship them, build our lives around them. But Nietzsche hurls a thunderbolt through that comfort. No idea is sacred. None. Not God, not morality, not freedom, not even truth itself. Every idea must be questioned, dismantled, dragged into the light and stripped of its disguise. Because the moment you declare something untouchable, you've stopped thinking and started obeying. Ideas are not holy. They are tools. They are weapons. They are lies dressed in logic or myths disguised as virtue. And once an idea becomes sacred, it becomes dangerous. Not because it's false, but because it becomes immune to challenge. That's when cruelty creeps in. That's when people stop listening. That's when the crowd turns righteous and the individual goes silent. Nietzsche believed that a living mind must be at war with its own beliefs. To grow is to attack what you once held dear. To evolve is to betray the certainty that once gave you peace. If you are thinking clearly, you will outgrow your own truths again and again. Most people don't want truth. They want comfort. They want an idea to kneel to shield them from chaos. But Nietzsche knew the cost of comfort is freedom, and the price of freedom is relentless questioning. even of your deepest convictions. So tear down your idols, burn your sacred cows, because if your idea cannot survive fire, it was never worthy of you. And if it is sacred, then let it die screaming, not silently. Becoming defeats being. We long for identity, for labels, for answers that stay still. We crave the illusion of being, a fixed self, a final truth, a solid ground to stand on. But Nietzsche sets fire to that comfort and whispers the dangerous truth. Being is a lie. Becoming, wild, shifting, unfinished, is the only thing that's real, and those who cling to who they are will be left behind by those brave enough to change. To be is to stop, to freeze, to declare, "This is me," and nail yourself to that image. But to become, that is war. It is motion. It is shedding skin after skin, burning down every false identity the moment it becomes too small. Becoming is not safe. It is not peaceful. It's painful, chaotic, sacred, but it is alive. Nietzsche knew that greatness doesn't come from being. It comes from the refusal to stay still, the refusal to be defined by the past, by expectation, by fear. To become is to betray yourself again and again in service of a deeper truth, not what you were, but what you might still become. This is why most people resist becoming, because it demands you kill the person you were yesterday. It demands you outgrow your comfort, your story, your name. But in that destruction lies evolution, freedom, power. Being is a coffin dressed as clarity. Becoming is the storm that breaks it open. And if you have the courage to walk into that storm again and again, Nietzsche believed you wouldn't just live, you would transform. Reject final answers. The hunger for a final answer is ancient. We want closure, certainty, a clean conclusion to the chaos of existence. But Nietzsche offers no such comfort. He demands something harder, something braver. Reject final answers. Because finality is not wisdom, it is surrender. It is the death of curiosity, the silencing of growth, the moment you trade becoming for safety. And in that moment, the soul begins to rot. Truth isn't a monument, it's a movement. Life doesn't end in answers, it spirals deeper into questions. Every time you think you've arrived, Nietzsche dares you to look again, to peel back what you were so sure of. Because answers, real ones, do not settle you. They shake you. They open more doors than they close. And when they don't, they become prisons. Final answers breed dogma. They harden the mind. They turn living thought into dead ideology. And Nietzsche knew the world is too vast, too brutal, too alive to ever be contained by one tidy explanation. The moment you think you know, you've stopped seeing, you've stopped becoming. This is why Nietzsche wrote in Fire and Fragments. He wasn't trying to convince you, he was trying to ignite you, to awaken the part of you that dares to stand in uncertainty without needing to be saved, because that is where life begins, not in what you hold, but in what you keep questioning. Reject final answers. Stay open, stay burning, because the ones who never arrive are the ones who keep moving forward. Every great idea is dangerous. We think of ideas as tools, as truths, as progress. But Nietzsche knew the darker truth. Every truly great idea is dangerous, not because it's wrong, but because it has the power to undo you. Real ideas don't decorate the mind, they detonate it. They don't confirm what you already believe, they tear it to pieces and dare you to survive what's left. The ideas that matter most, the ones that burn through history, are the ones that threaten the world as it is. They offend, they divide, they drag hidden truths into the light and force you to look. The idea that God is dead, that morality is a human invention, that you are not a fixed self, but a constant becoming. These aren't clever thoughts, they are blades. Nietzsche knew, if your idea doesn't scare you, it's not great. If it doesn't cost you sleep, relationships, reputation, it's not alive. because great ideas demand more than agreement. They demand transformation. They require you to betray the comfort of the herd, to stand alone with nothing but a burning truth in your hands. And once that kind of idea enters you, there's no going back. You either grow into something larger or collapse under the weight of what you now see. That's why most people prefer shallow thinking, safe opinions, ideas that decorate the soul instead of tearing it open. But Nietzsche's fire burns for those brave enough to be broken by an idea, because the only thoughts worth having are the ones you might not survive. Solitude enables thought. The world is loud, full of voices, noise, opinions, expectations. But Nietzsche knew something most fear to face. You cannot truly think until you are alone, not just physically, but existentially alone, stripped of influence, detached from the herd, far from the echo chamber of approval and belonging. Solitude is not loneliness. It is not isolation. It is the crucible where original thought is born. Most people never think their own thoughts. They adopt, inherit, repeat. They swim in collective ideas and call it truth. But Nietzsche's philosopher is a stranger to the crowd. He must step outside to see clearly. Because in solitude, masks fall. You hear your real questions. You face the silence where no one claps, no one nods, no one saves you from your own depth. And it hurts. That's why so few stay there. Solitude shows you how uncertain your beliefs are, how fragile your identity is without others to mirror it back. It forces you to ask, who am I when no one's watching? And more terrifying, what do I believe when there's no one left to agree with me? But if you endure it, if you walk through that desert alone, you begin to think, not parrot, not posture, think, create, see. And those thoughts, born in silence, cut deeper than any shouted opinion ever could. Nietzsche didn't see solitude as a luxury. He saw it as a requirement, because thought that needs company is not thought, it is performance. And only in solitude can you meet the mind that is truly your own. Irony protects the soul. Irony is often misunderstood as sarcasm or clever distance, a smirk, a raised eyebrow, a joke at the expense of seriousness. But Nietzsche saw something far deeper. Irony is armor. It is how the soul survives in a world that crushes sincerity, mocks pain, and drowns meaning in noise. Irony is not apathy. It is defense. It is the quiet weapon of those who feel too much, who see too much and know they cannot say it plainly without being torn apart. The ironic soul is not hollow. It's burning, but it hides the flame behind a laugh, behind a wink, behind a mask that says, "Don't worry, I don't believe in this too much." Because if you say it too directly, if you expose your truth raw and naked, people will destroy it, or worse, ignore it. Irony protects the sacred by disguising it as play. Nietzsche understood this intimately. He wrote in riddles, in provocations, in paradox, not because he lacked conviction, but because he knew conviction alone cannot survive in a brutal world. He buried truth in style, in fire, in laughter, not to dilute it, but to guard it, to preserve its power for those willing to dig. Irony lets the soul speak without being devoured. It deflects the shallow while inviting the deep. It is not cowardice, it is strategy. Because when the world has no ears for your scream, sometimes the only way to tell the truth is to whisper it through a smirk. Strength comes with vulnerability. We are told strength is stone, cold, guarded, unshakable. But Nietzsche, ever the destroyer of illusions, saw a deeper truth. True strength does not hide vulnerability. It holds it, because anything that must protect itself at all times is not strong, it is afraid. The strongest souls are not the ones who build the highest walls. They are the ones who walk through the fire without armor, fully exposed, and still refuse to kneel. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is risk. It is the willingness to feel deeply, to be wounded, to lose, to care. It means facing life without guarantees. And Nietzsche knew there is no greatness without risk, no courage without fear, no love without the power to break. If you avoid vulnerability, you avoid life itself. The one who never cries, never admits pain, never opens their heart, this is not power. It is paralysis. It is hiding. But the one who loves, who creates, who dares to speak the truth, even when their voice shakes, they carry a strength forged in something far more sacred than control. They are strong because they have nothing to prove, because they have already faced the possibility of being broken and chose to live open anyway. Nietzsche didn't want hard men or hollow heroes. He wanted depth, fire, spirit, and spirit comes not from avoiding pain, but from walking into it, feeling everything, and choosing to rise anyway. Strength without vulnerability is rigidity, but strength with vulnerability, that's unshakable, that's real. Live mythically. Nietzsche doesn't want you to survive. He wants you to burn, not in the shallow heat of ego, but in the immortal fire of myth. To live mythically is to rise above routine, above safety, above mere existence. It's to make your life a story worth telling, not to others, but to yourself, to become legend in your own bones, to live with such intensity, risk, beauty, and depth that your days feel carved in ancient stone. Living mythically isn't pretending you're a hero, it's becoming one, not through perfection, but through struggle, through choosing meaning over comfort, creation over consumption, love over numbness, even when it breaks you. It means seeing your pain as part of your origin story, your failures as sacred trials, your desires not as shame, but as sacred flames leading you somewhere only you were meant to go. The mythic life is not about being seen, it's about seeing yourself through the lens of eternity, asking, if a God were watching, would this moment matter? Would this decision echo? Would this version of me be worthy of the fire that lit my soul? Most people exist like footnotes, but Nietzsche wanted you to be poetry, to live as if your soul were being read by the stars, not perfectly, not peacefully, but mythically, in pain, in power, in wild, unapologetic becoming. Because the world doesn't need more survival, it needs more sagas, and your life, if you dare to live it mythically, could become the kind that breaks time and speaks forever. Be your own cause. We are born into systems, names, nations, rules, religions. Before we take our first step, the world hands us a script. Be this, believe that, want this, follow them. And most people spend their lives serving causes that are not their own. Ideals inherited, identities assigned, dreams pre-approved. But Nietzsche calls from the fire. Be your own cause, not a reaction, not a product, a beginning, a source, a force. To be your own cause is to stop living as a consequence of others. It means cutting the invisible strings that tell you who you should be. It means no longer being the echo of your past, your parents, your culture, your pain. It is the terrifying moment when you stop saying, I am this because of, and start declaring, I am this because I chose it. But it is not easy, because to be your own cause, you must destroy the excuses that protect you. You must take full responsibility, not just for your failures, but for your desires, your power, your becoming. No one to blame, no one to follow, just you, creating yourself breath by breath, decision by decision, in the face of a world that wants you to stay predictable. Nietzsche believed the highest soul is the one who says yes to themselves, who does not ask for meaning, but makes it, who does not beg for purpose, but becomes it. Because when you are your own cause, your life is no longer a reaction to the world. It becomes a reason the world must react to you. Truths are context-bound. We hunger for truth, like it's something eternal, solid, pure, untouched by time or place. But Nietzsche shatters that hunger with a brutal, liberating realization. Truths are not absolute. They are context-bound. What feels true is shaped by where you stand, who you are, what you need, and when you ask. There is no truth with a capital T, only shifting perspectives that burn with clarity one moment and collapse under new light the next. Every truth is a child of its environment. The truth of a warrior is not the truth of a priest. The truth of the dying is not the truth of the young. What sounds like wisdom today may be delusion tomorrow, and the truths you cling to now, they may be nothing more than survival stories dressed in logic, built to protect your wounds, your hopes, your identity. Nietzsche forces us to admit what terrifies us. Truth bends. It bends to culture, to need, to fear. It adapts to survive. And when we say, "This is the truth," what we often mean is, "This is the truth that serves me right now." This isn't cynicism, it's freedom. Because once you see that truths shift with context, you stop worshiping them. You start using them, shaping them, letting them die when they no longer serve your becoming. Truth is not a monument, it's a mirror, one that changes shape as you change, and if you have the courage to look again and again without flinching, you won't find certainty, you'll find evolution, and that is the only truth that never breaks. Kill your idols. We worship quietly, not just gods, but leaders, thinkers, lovers, celebrities, beliefs. We kneel before those who seem to shine brighter, speak louder, live larger. We call them heroes, geniuses, icons, and we let them define us. But Nietzsche spits the truth like fire. Kill your idols, not out of hate, but out of hunger, because every idol you cling to keeps you from becoming yourself. Idols are not sacred, they are prisons. They freeze what should evolve. They demand obedience instead of awakening. And the moment you elevate someone else's voice above your own, you silence your potential. You start to imitate instead of create. You admire instead of act. You follow instead of become. Idols are dangerous, not because they are false, but because they are too perfect. They don't bleed. They don't doubt. They cast long shadows over your own becoming. And Nietzsche demands rebellion. Smash them. Question your gods. Burn your books. Dismantle the teachers you worship, not because they taught you nothing, but because they taught you enough to outgrow them. The truth is, your idols cannot save you. They can only spark something, and once that spark is lit, your duty is not to bow, but to rise, to go farther, to dig deeper, to live louder, even if it means betraying everything that once inspired you. Because the final act of reverence is not loyalty, it's liberation. You honor your idols best by leaving them behind and becoming something they could have never imagined. Dare to offend. We are told to be polite, to be agreeable, to keep the peace, but Nietzsche spits on that softness and demands something harder. Dare to offend, not to provoke for ego, not to harm, but to speak truth so fully, so fiercely, that it shakes the silence. Because anything worth saying, anything that burns with real power, will offend someone, and if it offends no one, it's probably not worth saying at all. Offense is not cruelty, it is clarity. It means you are no longer hiding behind softened words and filtered opinions. You are standing naked in your belief, willing to be hated rather than be hollow. The world tells you to be careful. Nietzsche tells you to be dangerous, because the most dangerous thing is a voice that cannot be silenced, a soul that refuses to shrink for the comfort of others. Every idea that ever changed the world was offensive once. Every truth that ever freed a soul wounded someone first, and the ones who never dare to offend, they live quiet, forgettable lives, liked by many, known by none. This is not a call to rage. It is a call to honesty without apology, to say what needs to be said, even if your voice shakes, even if the room goes cold, because offense isn't the end of a conversation, it's the start of something real. You will never find your truth in the echoes of approval. You find it where your courage crosses the line and refuses to step back. So, step forward and let them flinch. Embrace the tragic. We are taught to run from tragedy, to fix it, escape it, drown it in comfort. But Nietzsche does not flinch. He walks straight into the fire and says, embrace the tragic, not as defeat, but as depth, not as horror, but as truth, because life, at its core, is not clean. It breaks, it bleeds, it dies. And the moment you accept this, not with despair, but with reverence, you unlock a kind of strength that cannot be touched. Tragedy is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. Love ends, beauty fades, dreams fail, and yet we keep going. That is the power Nietzsche worshipped, the will that says yes despite the pain, the spirit that doesn't wait for perfection, but dances in the ruins, laughing, weeping, still alive. Most people want life to make sense, but the tragic soul doesn't demand answers. It demands authenticity. It stares at the absurd and says, I will still create. To embrace the tragic is to stop pretending, to stop asking the universe to be fair. It's to love, knowing loss is coming, to build knowing it will collapse, to give your whole heart to something you will lose, not because you're naive, but because you're brave. And in that courage, you transcend. You become something larger than survival. Nietzsche didn't ask us to deny tragedy. He asked us to become worthy of it, because the soul that can hold sorrow and still sing, that soul doesn't just endure life, it elevates it. Forge meaning. The world doesn't come with meaning. It doesn't arrive with instructions, purpose, or divine promises. It simply is, vast, cold, chaotic, indifferent. And Nietzsche dares you to face that horror without flinching. There is no hidden script, no cosmic plan, no destiny waiting to unfold, but in that terrifying freedom lies your greatest power. You can forge meaning yourself. Meaning is not found, it is created, hammered from your pain, molded from your passions, shaped by your will. And the moment you stop waiting for life to tell you what it means and start declaring it yourself, that is the moment you become more than just a survivor. You become a creator. This isn't easy. It's brutal. It means killing your inherited beliefs, betraying comfort, building something from nothing, over and over, with bloodied hands and no guarantee it will stand. But Nietzsche knew the soul cannot breathe without meaning, and when there is none given, the strong do not collapse. They invent it. You can take your trauma and forge strength, take your loneliness and forge beauty, take your longing and forge vision. It won't look like anyone else's path. It's not supposed to. Your meaning must be yours, or it is nothing. Most people wait to be given a reason to live. Nietzsche says, forge one. Make it so real, so deep, so alive that even the void steps back in awe. Because in a godless world, the most divine act left is to create meaning anyway. Abandon certainty. Certainty is seductive. It feels like safety, like ground beneath your feet, like answers that quiet the chaos. But Nietzsche saw certainty for what it truly is, a cage, a soothing lie dressed as truth. Because to be certain is to stop moving, to freeze your becoming, to close your eyes and declare, this is the way things are, when life itself is nothing but flux, contradiction, eruption, death, and rebirth. The ones who crave certainty are the ones most afraid to think. They cling to dogma, to rules, to systems that give them a sense of control, but at the cost of their freedom. Nietzsche demands that you let it go, abandon certainty, not because nothing matters, but because certainty kills the one thing that does, your capacity to grow, to question, to transform. Doubt is not weakness. It is the beginning of power. It cracks open the walls you've built around your soul. It forces you to see the world not as you were told it is, but as it actually is, wild, shifting, indifferent, alive. Only in uncertainty do you begin to create, to choose, to truly live. Certainty says, I know who I am, but becoming whispers, you've barely begun. And if you refuse to abandon what you think you know, You will never meet the version of yourself that waits on the other side of your undoing. Nietzsche doesn't offer certainty, he offers fire, because the soul doesn't evolve through answers. It evolves through the courage to live without them. Become who you are. It sounds like a riddle, simple, even gentle. Become who you are. But Nietzsche meant it as a challenge, a command, a provocation to the soul, because who you are isn't obvious, it isn't inherited, it isn't sitting quietly inside you waiting to be discovered. It must be created, forged, fought for. You are not a finished product, you are a possibility. And to become who you are is to rise into that possibility, no matter the cost. Most people never try. They copy, they conform, they obey the blueprint handed to them by parents, society, fear. They build a self from safety, from expectation. But Nietzsche says, that's not you. That's a mask, a survival costume. To become who you are, you must tear it off. You must betray what's false, even if it once felt like home. You must burn what you've been in order to give birth to what you could be. This is not self-improvement. It is self-overcoming. It is not about finding yourself. It is about choosing yourself, building your voice, your values, your fire, brick by brutal brick. Becoming who you are means stepping into your own abyss, facing your chaos, your contradictions, your pain, and turning it into form, into force. You will be hated for it. You will be misunderstood. But the soul that becomes itself is the soul that becomes free. Because Nietzsche knew the greatest human task is not to follow, not to win, not even to survive. It is to become who you were meant to become, even if you must invent that person from the ashes. Laugh at the abyss. The abyss waits for everyone. It's the silence behind your questions, the black hole beneath your beliefs, the vast nothingness where meaning dies, where certainty dissolves, where the gods go to rot. Most people see it and freeze. They crumble, they run. But Nietzsche offers a different response, one that is terrifying, defiant, and holy. Laugh at the abyss, not because it's funny, but because laughter is the soul's last rebellion. When everything you once believed has fallen apart, when the world offers no answers, when the void stares back and whispers nothing matters, you laugh. Not out of madness, but out of freedom, because the laugh says, you cannot break me. It is the sound of a spirit that no longer needs illusions to stand tall. The abyss wants you to fear it, to kneel, to collapse into despair, but laughter turns it into smoke. It means you've seen the worst and you're still here. You've stared into the infinite and found not terror, but power. Because if life has no meaning, then you are free to create it. If there are no rules, you become the rule maker. And laughter is the music of that becoming. Nietzsche's laughter isn't light. It's not cheap. It's forged in fire. It is the laughter of one who has died inside and chosen to live anyway, who has seen the void and danced. Because in the face of nothing, the greatest act is to smile, not in denial, but in absolute, unshakable defiance. Sins can be strengths. Nietzsche shatters the moral mirror and turns the reflection upside down. What you've been told is sin may be the seed of your strength. The traits condemned by tradition, pride, lust, ambition, rage, are not always vices. They are raw power, repressed by a world that fears its own potential. What if your so-called darkness isn't something to purge, but something to refine? Pride can be the courage to stand alone. Lust, the hunger for connection that breaks through shame. Ambition, the fire that builds worlds. Even rage, when aimed with clarity, can become justice. Nietzsche urges you not to blindly obey morality, but to question what serves your soul. Who defined your sins? Who benefits from your guilt? And what would happen if you reclaim those instincts, not as shameful, but as sacred? The church called strength a threat. Society called desire a disease. They needed you docile, humble, obedient. But Nietzsche dares you to look deeper, to see that beneath every thou shalt not, may be a piece of your becoming. The thing you repress might be the thing that frees you. This is not indulgence, it is alchemy. It is taking what you've buried and turning it into something fierce, beautiful, and true, not by denying it, but by owning it, mastering it, letting it live under your command, not your chains. Because sometimes what makes you dangerous is what was always most divine in you. Live as if you were the lawgiver of existence. Nietzsche didn't want followers. He wanted creators. He didn't ask you to obey truth. He dared you to invent it, to live as if you were the lawgiver of existence itself, not a seeker, not a servant, but the one who carves meaning into the void, the one who speaks values into being, the one who does not ask, what is right, but roars, this is what I will it to be. It's terrifying because it leaves you naked, no God to lean on, no tradition to hide behind, no one to blame, just your trembling will against the infinite silence of the universe. But Nietzsche knew this is freedom. This is where the human spirit stops crawling and begins to stand. To live this way means you accept that nothing comes pre-written. It means you don't just question the rules, you replace them. You decide what is sacred. You decide what is worth suffering for. You decide the shape of your soul, and then you live it boldly, without apology, without waiting for permission. This isn't arrogance, it's responsibility. The weight of being the author of your own existence. To know that every action, every creation, every refusal sends a shockwave into reality. Nietzsche believed the rarest, highest souls are those who stop living under laws and become the source of law, not through tyranny, through truth, through fire, through becoming the reason life matters at all. Because when you live as if you were the lawgiver of existence, you don't just live, you create a world.